The paper man who raised himself wants to marry me. Infrastructure author, my favorite plum wine copy. This article is also known as The Imperial Marshal Wants to Fuck Me, and I only want to engage in infrastructure. Cold on the outside and sticky on the inside. Susalai died at a young age. When I woke up again, I found that, not only did I not die, but I became the new king of a certain alien empire. At that time, he fell on the emperor's exclusive golden chair, and in front of him stood a handsome man in a white military uniform. The man wore black high boots that reached his knees, stomped on his chest hard, a cruel and bloodthirsty smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then pressed the laser gun to his forehead. "Go to hell, new emperor," he said. "Wait, wait." When he saw the man's face clearly, Susalai was stunned. Why does the man in front of him look so similar to his paper man? This handsome uniform on his body was replaced by a mission he had done for a long time. Si Sheng has an unknown secret: he can hear the voice of the gods. When everyone around him was fascinated by the princess, he knew that everything about the princess was a gift from the gods, and it really saved him from the slave owner. It's that great god. He is mysterious and powerful, and has the most moving voice in the world. He wanted to see him like crazy. Finally, the gods asked him that day, what would happen to him if he appeared before him. Si Sheng knelt down on one knee and humbly offered his loyalty. However, at this time, he finally realized that he already had a deeper ambition for this in his heart. It is probably a story of traveling through another world and rebuilding their home together with their own paper people. Edible Guidelines 1. Another World Infrastructure, the fourth natural disaster text, will appear after the player. The emotional line in the early stage accounts for a lot, and the plot in the middle and later stages is mainly 2. Daily Update, updated at 12 o'clock in the evening. 3. The small theater is purely for entertainment, please focus on the text. 4. If the cover artist at She Can Stop, genuine commercial authorization. Content label, Interstellar Suite Wenchuang Wen Infrastructure Search Keywords, Protagonist, Susalai, Si Sheng. One sentence introduction, and I just want to play infrastructure purpose, to make a fortune and build a country. Brief review of the work. After Susalai's death, he traveled to the game world and became the new king of the Novice Village Empire. The state of the empire is miserable. Not only is it impoverished, but it is about to be expelled from the Interstellar Alliance for failing to pay the annual fee. There are also wild monsters everywhere, and it is in danger of being destroyed by interstellar alien beasts at any time. In order to survive, and to see his relatives again in the future, he can only work with paper people to farm and build infrastructure, lead the empire to become rich, and finally lead the Fourth Calamity Legion to sweep the interstellar and become a cosmic power. Brother Su, tonight's performance was very successful. In the passenger seat, the assistant flipped through the photos and comments on the social software, turned around and said cheerfully. Susalai buckled his seatbelt slowly, looked sideways, and looked out of the car window. The fans were still waving the support light signs and saying goodbye warmly. The slightly pale handsome face, illuminated by the blurred light, revealed a somewhat melancholy and gentle look. After a long time, the young man withdrew his gaze, his expression already subdued. "Drive," he whispered. "Okay." The assistant asked the driver to drive quickly, then continued to bow his head, busy replying to messages. Susalai glanced at him, leaned lazily on the back of the chair, and took out his phone to play games. Ding dong! At this moment, his cell phone rang suddenly, and a message popped up. "Second brother, have you arrived at the residence? Second brother, give me a call when you arrive." Susalai replied casually with a yes, and then continued to switch back to the game interface to operate. When he returned to the suburban villa, he took a comfortable bath and came out of the bathroom when the knock on the door just sounded. He walked over to open the door. "Third young master, your milk." The servant stood at the door and said respectfully. "Well, thanks." Susalai wiped his hair with a towel in one hand, a milk glass in the other, and kicked the door with his toes. Back on the sofa, he threw himself down, and then sent a video call request to his second brother. Beep beep, the connection sounded. Susalai held the milk cup, and when he lowered his head and inadvertently swept the documents scattered on the coffee table, his originally gentle movements suddenly accelerated. I saw that he quickly picked up a certain document, threw it on the floor, and threw a pillow to cover it, and the big screen on the wall just lit up. A man wearing gold-rimmed glasses appeared on the screen, his facial features vaguely similar to Susalai. Susalai. As soon as the video was successfully connected, the man was ready to go crazy, but when he saw Susalai's appearance, he couldn't help but stop. "You wiped the milk foam," he said with disgust. Susalai glanced at the documents on the ground, making sure that he would not be found, so he leaned back on the sofa and wiped a circle on his lips with his thumb. The white milk froth was scraped off, and he stuck out his tongue to lick it off gently, with a casual movement like a lazy cat. Su Yuheng glanced at him, and finally couldn't help sighing, "Can't you use a towel or a handkerchief? What does this look like?" Susalai blinked. "Oh." He responded politely, grabbed the towel on his shoulders, wiped his fingers and asked, "Second brother, what's the matter with me?" Su Yuheng took a deep breath. He slowed down, regained his momentum, and counted a document in his hand. 3 villas, 10 sports cars, 5% of Su's shares, and 1 billion in liquidity. The man reflected on the big screen, read these items of data, and finally raised his glasses. His eyes behind the lenses were as sharp as knives. "Susalai, you'd better give me a reasonable explanation." The young man picked up the milk on the table, took a sip, and said nonchalantly, "It's just an interesting investment." "Investment? What kind of investment needs so much money?" Su Yuheng stared at him. "Didn't you already know?" Susalai asked. The second brother never fights unprepared battles. Before coming to him, he must have investigated clearly. Su Yuheng couldn't help sighing. Holographic technology is a bottomless pit, and it is impossible to see results for at least 20 years. Why should you throw all your net worth in one breath? "I don't have all my net worth, I still have some left. That's almost there." Seeing that his second brother's eyes were about to breathe fire, Susalai shrugged. "Second brother also knows that I have always liked to play games." His tone became lighter. "I'm very optimistic about this project. Holographic games will definitely become a trend in the future, and." He suddenly smiled. "The project developers have promised me that they will design an NPC in the game based on me. I will become an emperor in the game, rule the country, and reign supreme." Su Yuheng looked at him with an inexpressible expression on his face. Probably because his eyes were too straightforward, Susalai coughed lightly, and finally restrained his slightly middle-aged demeanor. "These are my private property. I'm still young, I just need to make money after I lose," he said. "As long as you help me hide it, don't tell my elder brother and parents, and promise that nothing will happen." "Oh, you still know to be afraid." Brother Su raised his glasses and said, "There is a dance next week. You go for me, and I will help you keep it a secret." "A blind date again?" Susalai frowned. "Second brother, I'm a public figure anyway." "Are you going?" "Go." "Okay, I'll send you the invitation letter later." Su Yuheng nodded with satisfaction, and after 2 more words, the communication was cut off with a snap. The big screen went dark. Susalai slowly stepped back, leaning on the sofa with his thin back, and the moonlight filtered in from the window and poured onto his handsome face, making his face even paler. He lowered his eyebrows, thinking a little absently. Moonlight climbed onto the pillow that fell on the floor, and saw the title of the document pressed under the pillow, vaguely writing the words "Medical Record Report." After a long time, Susalai regained his senses. He scratched his half-dried hair, reached for his phone, fell on the sofa, and continued to sink into the game. As a game is won, a system prompt pops up on the phone. The battlefield has won a total of 1,000 victories, ranking first in the battlefield standings. Congratulations on winning the title of Grand Marshal. You can go to the achievement mall and spend jade to exchange status rewards. Susalai was taken aback. He couldn't remember how long he had been doing this task, but he didn't expect it to be completed. He clicked on the achievement mall, and sure enough, he saw the lit marshal's uniform in the battlefield column. Marshal uniform description, unique identity pack. Redemption restriction, a total of 1,000 victories have been won in the battlefield challenge, the first place in the battlefield standings, and the title of Grand Marshal. Exchange conditions, jade *1000. Susalai clicks to redeem. Successful exchange, deduct jade *1000. A message indicating that the exchange was successful popped up on the screen of the mobile phone, and at the same time, a card with a quality of jade jumped out. In the special effect of the golden light, you can see that on the card is a set of gorgeous military uniforms inlaid with white gold threads, and the 4 characters Marshal's uniform are written under the card. With his successful redemption, the full server broadcast started right above the game, and the system message column in the lower left corner also began to swipe the screen synchronously. World news has exploded, and private messages have begun to ring incessantly. Susalai ignored it. He carefully put the cards into his backpack, then clicked on the map to select a common location. Entering the Dark Knight Duke's mansion, after the phone screen was dimmed, it soon became bright again. Exquisite and luxurious, there is no lack of majestic ancient castles, slowly appearing on the screen. It is night in the game, and the castle is brightly lit. Dark Knight Duke Si Sheng has just returned from the battlefield and is bathing and changing clothes. Susalai raised his eyebrows slightly, tapped the screen with his slender fingers, and entered the castle bath. It's a pity that when the picture turned from dark to bright, his Duke of Dark Knight was already dressed neatly, and except for a little wet hair, no other traces could be seen. I saw the moonlight shining down from the zenith, reflecting a bright moon on the sparkling pool water. Next to the bathtub, stood a tall and slender man. The man has short light blonde hair, but is dressed in a pure black Dark Knight Duke suit. His grey-blue eyes, which should be gentle colors, give people a sense of stern majesty. Under Susalai's gaze, he slowly stretched out his hand, grabbed a scepter inlaid with red gems from the void, and played with it. Suddenly, as if he noticed something, the man looked at Susalai sharply. Susalai slaps it, smashes its mouth. Although he knew it was the game's eye-following system, every time he looked at his boss Sheng, he always felt like he was looking at the real life. After only looking at each other for a few seconds, the man's expression suddenly changed, he lowered his head, and bowed respectfully to the void. "Sir God!" A low, hoarse voice, solemn and solemn, full of masculine charm. Susalai's eyelids were half lifted, looking at the large open-air bath full of European classical style behind the man. For some reason, he suddenly remembered the strategy post he saw when he was bored today. The post said that the bath scene seems to have a special plot. "Lord God, I don't know if you came to the cold house late at night, what instructions do you have?" The man's voice was hoarse, revealing a touch of tiredness, as if he had really experienced a battle and had just returned from the battlefield. Susalai regained his senses, sat up, pressed the voice button with his fingertips, and said softly, "Come and see you." Below the game, a dialog box appears. "You said to Si Sheng, come and see you." This is an intelligent voice system embedded in the game. NPCs will respond instantly according to the player's words, which is a feature of this game. In the game screen, the handsome and indifferent blonde man lightly pursed his lips, his expression more serious than before. However, Susalai knew him very well. As soon as his eyes moved, he landed on the man's ears, which were covered by wet hair. Sure enough, he saw that the original jade white color gradually turned into a faint pink color. Susalai snorted lightly. The planning of this game is really good. After a long time, the blond man bent down and saluted again. It was a humble pleasure. The silver-white moonlight fell on him, coating him with a layer of soft light, and the light golden hair was blown by the breeze, shining brightly, and every detail revealed an intoxicating beauty. Su Salai leaned on the armrest of the sofa, rested his chin leisurely, and lazily admired the beauty of the paper man. After a while, he held down the voice key and said slowly, "I brought you a gift, try it out." Then he opened his backpack, selected the card of the martial uniform just now, paused after thinking for a while, changed the scene of the bath to a garden, and then clicked equip. The cards turned into golden dots and disappeared. In the special effect of flying white feathers, the man standing under the rose trellis changed his attire in the blink of an eye. The originally slightly gloomy and cold bangs were all combed, and the handsome back head fully revealed the handsome and extraordinary facial features of the man. With wide shoulders and narrow waist, his slender figure was wrapped in a white military uniform embroidered with gold thread, and a pair of long straight legs were put on long leather boots that reached the knees. At the moment when the dressing was over, the man in military uniform pulled out the saber from his waist, and the cloak behind him flew up. In The Sound of Hunting, the momentum is like a rainbow. I have to say that this dress-up pose is really a middle school, but when it was shown by S.I. Sheng, it was unexpectedly harmonious. It's just that he obviously didn't like it. The man's thin lips were tightly pursed, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and the blush of his ears spread to the roots of his ears. Su Salai liked it very much. It's not worth it for him to spend so long, this unique identity outfit is really good, and every detail is heavily stepped on his aesthetics. He collapsed on the sofa again, took a few photos with the in-game screenshot tool as a souvenir, and opened the character bar. The first one was naturally S.I. Sheng's 5-star character card, followed by a whole row of 2-star 3-star character cards. Each card character is very beautiful, with different attributes, as well as a completely different life experience and personality. This mobile game is called God's Game. Strictly speaking, this is a female-oriented card mobile game. The protagonist of the story is a princess who was forced to become the first heir to the throne because of the unexpected death of her brother, but the ministers were reluctant to assist her, and they were more optimistic about her uncle. As a god player, he decided to help her choose 4 capable close ministers to help her become a king and manage the country well. So, there is the gameplay of this game: drawing cards, cultivating powerful characters, helping the princess to overcome 5 obstacles and 6 generals, and grow into the next king. Once the game was launched, it quickly captured a large number of female players with its exquisite style of painting, outstanding interactive system and excellent love line, and became an annual hit game. Su Salai also played it by accident, and then it got out of hand, but he was not interested in the love line, and completely regarded it as a development and upgrade game to play. Among them, S.I. Sheng is undoubtedly the most favored by him. Su Salai clicked on S.I. Sheng's character card, and his attribute panel popped up. Looking at the majestic Grand Marshal on the panel, he couldn't help but think of the first time he saw S.I. Sheng. At that time, he was still a poor little slave. He was imprisoned in a cage with dirty clothes and clothes. Every card character has it, and everyone's life story is different. But now, S.I. Sheng has not only grown into a big beauty with blonde hair and blue eyes, but also has a full 5-star level in strength, full of all attributes and skills. He clicked on the skill tree, and every branch on the tree had been unlocked, and all of them had reached the highest level. Just looking at this tree gave people a full sense of accomplishment. Only now, coupled with the title of Grand Marshal, it seems that he can graduate. It took almost a year, and it was not easy. Su Salai frowned slightly. An inexplicable sense of emptiness came to mind. He turned off S.I. Sheng's panel, and swiped the other cards. In fact, it's not impossible to develop another one. After all, other character cards are also pretty good looking, but when he thought of those tedious upgrade tasks, he gave up the idea. Everything about this game is good, but it's a little bit boring. Su Salai turned off the character bar. In the game screen, the man in the white military uniform is still standing quietly under the flower stand, as if waiting for his instructions at any time. Su Salai turned the camera, admiring the new look, and suddenly stopped. Looking at Si Sheng Junyi's face, without warning, an idea crept into his mind. He tilted his head, waiting for the idea to take shape. Afterwards, he pondered that idea over and over again, and then, he found that it seems interesting. Su Salai glanced at Si Sheng again, and finally decided to put it into practice, so he switched the game interface and called up the address book. He pressed a number. Beep duo, the phone rang twice and was answered immediately. "Doctor, it's me," Su Salai said. "Have you heard of the mobile Game of the Gods? I have an idea, and I want to ask you if it is feasible." He spoke softly, and the voice in the phone seemed a little fuzzy in the night. "Well, okay, sorry to bother you." Hanging up the phone, Su Salai switched back to the game again. The game interface is still frozen at the moment he quits. A man in a snow-white military uniform stands under the moon, his cloak is flying, handsome and comfortable. Su Salai held down the voice button, and he spoke to himself regardless of whether the paper man could understand it or not. "Si Sheng, what will you do if you see me?" The intelligent voice system faithfully translated his words into words. Su Salai did not expect Si Sheng's answer. However, what he didn't expect was that the man standing under the moonlight suddenly put the sword back into the scabbard with a clanging sound. Immediately afterwards, he knelt on one knee and pressed his right hand to his heart. Si Sheng looked up at Su Salai, his expression pious and solemn. "If the Lord God appears in front of the humble, please allow the humble to crawl at your feet, kiss your toes, and offer you unswerving loyalty to death." Su Salai looked at his hot eyes and slightly curled his lips. "Well, that's how it feels." A week later. A research laboratory. Su Salai took off the last sensor element attached to his body, and behind him, the assistant had shaken off a shirt and draped it over his shoulders, covering his slender and graceful back. The young man stretched his hand through his sleeve, and under the regretful gaze of the researcher in the laboratory next to him, he slowly buttoned his shirt one by one. "Is that all right?" He looked at an old man with grey hair. The old man was wearing a white lab coat and a pair of reading glasses. At this moment, he was holding an electronic board and was recording something on it. Hearing that, he nodded. "Well, all your physical data has been recorded." I saw him operate on the electronic board, and on the big screen, a virtual character suddenly appeared, which was Su Salai's mannequin. Of course, the lower body was wearing trousers, and only the upper body was wearing fruit. Even so, it was enough to make people unable to take their eyes off. The doctor looked at Su Salai's data model. "Actually, it may be different from reality. I will try my best to help you optimize the image and strive for perfection. However, the plot setting is not my job. If you have any ideas, you can discuss with the game development side. As long as it is your request, we will do our best to meet it." Su Salai nodded, and then listened to the doctor and said, "Your proposal a few days ago is good. Linking the two games will indeed bring a lot of benefits. As for connecting your data in God's game, as long as it is authorized by the game company, it can be done technically." Su Salai's eyes lit up, and the corners of his lips curved slightly. "Well, authorization is not a problem." "Good work, doctor." Seeing the smile on his face, the doctor was slightly relieved. "It's nothing, after all. Without your support, this project should have been stopped due to insufficient funding. If you need anything else, just mention it." Su Salai pursed his lips. He pondered for a moment and said seriously, "Although I know it is difficult, I hope to see results within 2 years." The doctor couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I don't dare to guarantee this, I can only say that I will do my best." "Well, then do your best and obey the destiny. Su Salai raised his head and looked at himself on the big screen, a little lost. At this moment, the phone in his pocket rang. It was his second brother Su Yuheng. Well, the flight at 3 o'clock in the afternoon will arrive in the evening. Su Salai answered the phone, waved to the professor, and walked out of the institute with his assistant. Don't worry, I will definitely help you screw up the blind date. Getting in the car to the airport, Su Salai hung up the phone and opened God's game again. In the gap between the game loading, he looked up and looked at the sky outside. The weather is fine today, with blue sky and white clouds, and the plane can be seen crossing the sky, leaving a shallow white line. Su Salai's thoughts drifted away, and finally, he opened the phone address book and called the manager. Sister Yoon, I'm going to hold a concert. The time is set in 2 months. You can arrange it. After the concert, I officially quit the circle. It's nothing, just a little tired. Okay, sorry to trouble you. At 2:50 in the afternoon, Su Salai boarded the plane and was about to return to the capital to attend the blind date ball instead of his second brother. Everything is in order. It's just that he never imagined that fate would play tricks on people like this. The parting that should have been 2 years later turned out to be so early. When the plane fell from the sky into the deep sea, Su Salai only had time to take out his mobile phone, and in the background sound of whistling and screaming, he sent out the last text message. Thank goodness, although the airplane mode is turned on, the plane has Wi-Fi and can still surf the internet. Ding dong in the empty office, the phone on the table suddenly rang, and an unread message appeared. Second brother, don't be sad, there are no punctuation marks, and it is not immediately read by anyone, but maybe it can be delivered successfully, and the mission has been completed. Su Salai's death was not painful. The moment the plane entered the sea, he was stunned by a heavy object. When he regained consciousness again, he found that he had no body and turned into a light spot floating in the night sky. It should be the night sky, right? The surroundings are pitch dark, but you can see the stars far and near, dotted in the dark blue sky, gorgeous and charming. Is this the world after death? Su Salai looked at the night sky in confusion. It turns out that after death, do people really turn into stars in the sky? In fact, when he got the case report and knew that he only had more than 2 years to live, he digested it by himself for a long time. He is a young master raised by the Su family, and a superstar with tens of millions of fans at a young age. He is only 23 years old and his life has just begun. Anger, pain, unwillingness. After these emotions, he finally accepted his fate and began to arrange his own affairs. Maybe he is actively receiving treatment and can live a few more years, but when he thinks of the ugly appearance of hair loss and bone destruction after chemotherapy, Su Salai is disheartened. He didn't want to die so undignified. He had an idea after stumbled across the project of holographic games. He took out almost all of his net worth, and helped match the bridges so that the project could continue. If he could play holographic games before he died, it would be best, if not, at least. You can also leave some memories for your loved ones. Unexpectedly, everything was planned well, but he did not die of disease, but a plane crash, or the plane he got on for his second brother. I just hope not to leave too much psychological shadow on the second brother. After all, he was about to die, but it was just a little earlier. Su Salai floated quietly in the air. Looking back on my short life, it seems that I had lived a wonderful enough life, but I didn't see the holographic game in the world, and I couldn't play it. After all, I felt a little regretful. He thought about it this way, and suddenly found that an icon slowly appeared in front of him, and the words Starry Sky Forum were written under the icon. Su Salai blinked. No, he has no eyes now. He stared at the icon, and as his mind moved, the icon jumped, and then a white screen appeared in front of him. Can I still go online if I die? Su Salai felt a little mysterious, but his attention involuntarily fell on the light screen. Star Era Official Forum. The 8 words at the top made Su Salai startled. Starry Sky is the name of the holographic game he invested in. He continued to look down. August 18 Freedom Summit and Kang Huo's 2 major guild presidents have to tell the stories. Receive the Star Core. There is a price Starry Sky for 10 years, record my indissoluble bond with this game, and the friends I have known in those years. Master Si Sheng and Mu Xing Zhou are real. Let me knock. Mensin, who just bought a virtual cabin, hope to find a master to take me, only have time to play at night. The posts on the homepage are very complex, and the activity is very high, and new posts are refreshed almost every second. Su Salai spent half a day browsing all the posts he saw, and was surprised to find that this was really the game forum of Starry Era, and the game has been in service for 10 years. 10 years after his plane crash, Era of the Stars came out successfully, and once it was launched, it caused a major earthquake in the game field. Although the development of the number of players was initially limited due to the high price of the game console and the controversy over the charging model, Starry Era has become a phenomenal explosive game with its excellent quality and 99% authenticity. What's more, because of the linkage with God's game, all the important NPCs in the early Star Era basically used the former's character image and name. God's Game, as a mobile game that has been launched for nearly 10 years, is still popular. After the paper people in it are virtualized, the linkage effect is amazing. This provided an endless stream of heat for the early development of Starry Era. 10 years after its release, almost no one on Blue Star does not know about this game, and its concurrent online users have exceeded 200 million. And with the popularity of game consoles, this value is still growing explosively, and in one fell swoop, Su Fengqing, chairman of the Su Group, has been promoted to the position of the world's richest man. In front of the screen, Su Salai was silent in a daze. Unexpectedly, this game has really become a trend. Seeing that his eldest brother Su Fengqing has become the richest man in the world, he can't help thinking, this time, parents and eldest brother shouldn't want to beat him, right? My heart is inexplicably empty. Su Salai continued to flip through the forum posts, and the more he looked, the more envious he became. If only he was still alive. Soon, his heart moved. If this is really a game forum 10 years later, and Si Sheng and these paper people have also been successfully implanted, then his game character. Does he remember his name as Snow Roland? As his thoughts turned, the search bar on the light screen entered the keywords of Snow Roland. In less than a second, all related posts popped up. The most eye-catching is the first Tranked Red Essence post that boy brought us this prosperous world, but he couldn't leave even a little bit of thoughts. The time for the post was about half a year after the game was launched. The title of the post obviously has no relevant words, but it was searched out, and it was the first one. Su Salai vaguely had a bad premonition in his heart. He finally opened the post. Sino Roland Starry Sky Calendar 10121030, the 15th Emperor of the Roland Empire, died 1 month after his enthronement, at the age of 18, the cause of death is unknown. Everyone should have heard of the last emperor who had the shortest reign in the Roland Empire, but what I want to say is that if you see his true face, you will find that he is the same as the Uranus superstar who died in a plane crash 10 years ago. Su Salai looks exactly the same. The landlord also accidentally discovered it while doing a special task, because I am a fan of Brother Su. Although he has been gone for nearly 10 years, he still listens to his songs from time to time. That is the youth of the master. So when I saw that portrait for the first time, the landlord's first reaction was that the game planner was also a fan of Brother Su, and the second reaction was anger. If you want to commemorate Brother Su, then you should do it well. To make such a game character and endow him with such a tragic fate is simply heartbreaking. It's so vicious. So he rushed to complain, because the landlord knew the insiders, so he knew some unknown behind-the-scenes stories. This game character was indeed designed in memory of Brother Su, or was authorized by Brother Su himself during his lifetime. And I also learned a cold knowledge. The reason why the game Starry Era came out successfully was because Brother Su invested all his net worth in this project during his lifetime. And in the follow-up, with the continuous provision of funds and talents by the Su Group, almost all of it was promoted. This game could be born at least 10 years earlier. Unfortunately, during the first closed beta, the game developers found that Sinyo Roland, who was created with Brother Su as the prototype, died a month before the start of the internal test, and the Emperor was replaced by his 9-year-old younger brother. As we all know, in the holographic game Starry Era, when an NPC dies, it is really dead and cannot be resurrected. And I finally believed that the game GM said so often. Once the game is running, it will be handed over to Hineo, and they can no longer forcefully interfere with the game process. I heard that the Su family almost killed the plan after learning the news. Damn, I want to kill the dog plan too. Anyone who has played can foresee the brilliant future of this game. However, Brother Su, who brought us this prosperous world, cannot accompany us to witness all this. There is still a long time to come, but Su Salai did not continue to watch. He is very upset now. He also wanted to scold, dog plan. Doesn't it mean that his game character is very strong? Why did he die so early? But no one could answer him. He could even imagine how devastated his parents and brothers would be when they received the news. Su Salai couldn't help lying flat. He stared at the stars in the night in a daze, not knowing what to do now and what would happen in the future. Will he stay in the sky as a star forever? Or will it be reincarnated? Gradually, he felt his body, or rather his soul, begin to fall, no longer under his control. What happened? After the extreme darkness, suddenly, he felt that his soul was no longer light, as if something had been sucked in. He seems to have a body again? Immediately afterwards, there was pain in the chest, like being hit by something heavy, and the pain spread from the chest to the limbs. Su Salai frowned and slowly opened his eyes. A splendid palace appeared in front of him. The chandelier in the dome shone slightly under the moonlight, and under him was a luxurious and beautiful golden chair inlaid with countless gems. But he didn't have the time to study this unfamiliar environment, and all his attention was attracted by the person in front of him. It was a blond man in a white military uniform. Regardless of his attire or his handsome appearance, it gave Su Salai a very familiar feeling. There was a name that came to mind in my mind. Then, the foot lifted by the man broke his thoughts. I saw the pair of black high boots that were worn to the knees, stomping on his chest. The man looked down at him condescendingly. His grey-blue eyes were indifferent and silent, without a trace of emotion, as if he was looking at a dead object. The suffocation and pain made Su Salai understand that the scene in front of him was not an illusion. His brows furrowed even tighter, but his heart was even more dazed. Then, without giving him any time to think and ask, the corner of the man's mouth suddenly evoked a smile, bloodthirsty and cruel, and a hint of scarlet flashed in his grey-blue eyes. He raised his hand and pressed the laser gun to Su Salai's forehead. The cold muzzle pressed against his forehead, Su Salai's pupils tightened. Although he didn't understand what happened, he definitely didn't want to die again. He stared at the man in front of him, too late to investigate why he looked so familiar, and countless countermeasures to escape had already flashed in his mind. But at this moment, a light screen appeared in front of his eyes. This time, it was not the Starry Sky Forum, but the singing talent was successfully activated. Chanting category, phonology talent function. You can activate special skills by chanting specific lyrics and songs to master the skills as follows. Catch description, unique skill, ignoring the level gap. Release conditions, quiet, focused. The mantra is chanted as follows. In just 1 second, Su Salai received all the information on the light screen. Even though he was still at a loss, at such a critical juncture, he could only be a dead horse and a living horse doctor. Seeing that he was in a daze, the blond man tilted his head slightly, and a hint of mockery flashed in his grey-blue eyes. He opened his thin lips slightly and said softly, "Go to hell, new emperor." "Wait a moment." Unfamiliar language blurted out. Su Silai had no time to think about it. He endured the pain in his chest and stared at the man in front of him who made him feel familiar. Suddenly, he understood something. "Sishin." He widened his eyes and shouted in disbelief. The blond man stopped his hand, pressed the muzzle of his forehead, and moved it slightly. "Do you still have last words?" he said nonchalantly. "It's really him." Su Silai was shocked. The cold and handsome blond man in front of him was indeed his paper man. The cold muzzle touched his forehead again, making Su Silai suddenly sober. He looked at Si Sheng and narrowed his eyes slightly. "Now is not the time to think wildly," he lowered his voice and forced himself to calm down. "I do have something to say." The blond man looked down at him. His grey-blue eyes didn't have a trace of warmth, but he gave him time to talk. "Quiet, focus, conditions are met." Releasable singing skill, capture. Su Silai took a deep breath. He reconfirmed the incantation on the panel and spoke softly despite the discomfort. Si Sheng looked at the silver-haired boy lying on the throne, frowning slightly. The boy's gentle and shallow voice was like the whisper of a lover in his ear. It was an ancient Roland love poem, with a bit of malice in its bewitching. Although it was presented in the form of singing, he could hear it. Si Sheng's brows were deeply wrinkled into the word Chuan, and the strength of stepping on the boy's chest unconsciously became heavier. Feeling offended, he didn't want to waste any more time. He pulled the trigger, and energy began to accumulate in the barrel. It only took a breath of time for this rude young new emperor to blossom his head and die in front of him. However, when the laser gun emitted a fierce light, the extreme sense of danger rose at the same time, and the fighting instinct made Si Sheng's wrist deflect. The laser catapult hit the gem on the golden chair, and with a light sound, the powder shards flew. Plop plop. Su Silai stared at Si Sheng, his heart beating fast for the rest of his life. A line of text appeared in the void in front of him. "Skill capture successfully activated, capture target." Si Sheng took a few steps back vigilantly, opened a safe distance, and naturally withdrew his feet on the boy's chest. However, the sense of danger followed, and became stronger and stronger. At this time, a mutation suddenly occurred. I saw a golden light rope born from under his feet, and at a lightning-fast speed, it went up along his legs and tied him firmly in the blink of an eye. Pa-ta! The laser gun in Si Sheng's hand fell to the ground. His hands were tied behind his back, and at this moment, the light rope lit up with golden light again, and a powerful coercion acted on him. Si Sheng was forced to kneel on one knee, with a look of forbearance and resistance on his face, and there were blue veins bulging on his forehead. Kakakaka! The floor tile that was pressed by his knees cracked open after cracks, and finally dented because it couldn't bear it. The cracking sound of the floor tiles was particularly crisp and even a little scary in the empty palace. Si Sheng gritted his teeth, but soon, he began to change his strategy and slowly loosened the strength of his struggle. Obviously, his response was correct. As he relaxed, the light emitted by the light rope gradually weakened, converged into the rope, and flowed around him along the light rope. Si Sheng slowly let out a breath, lowered his eyebrows and looked at the rope that bound him tightly, his eyebrows knitted together. This is a mysterious technique that he cannot solve. He couldn't help raising his eyes, looking at the young emperor on the throne. His eyes were cold. He still underestimated the Roland royal family. He didn't expect that this ignorant little emperor would hide such a powerful trump card. On the golden chair, Su Silai sat up clutching his chest and coughed violently a few times. Just now, he almost died. He glared at Si Sheng angrily, and then noticed that a stick suddenly appeared above his head. Blood strips? A thick and long blood bar just hovered above the head of the man in military uniform, striking and abrupt, with a hint of humor. Su Silai. So, did he really cross into the game? As soon as this idea emerged, the memory of another person suddenly emerged in his mind, giving Su Salai a splitting headache in an instant. He gritted his teeth, grasping the key points in the flow of information that almost burst his brain. The flow of information is still washing his mind. 18 years of memories have gathered into a huge torrent, constantly impacting his brain nerves. Not anymore. In a hurry, Su Salai closed his eyes and chose to let go of his thinking. The headache was relieved, and Su Salai breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't open his eyes until the pain was reduced to a tolerable level. At the sight of the silver-white hair hanging on his chest, he couldn't help but lose his mind. Snow Roland, he received his memory. This young man with long silver hair became the new emperor of the Roland Empire after the old emperor passed away. Today is 1 month since he ascended the throne. He couldn't sleep at night, sneaked away from the guards, and came to the hall wearing a nightgown, but he met Si Sheng without thinking. Si Sheng, the Duke of Dark Night and the Grand Marshal of the Roland Empire, not only holds a high position, but also holds a lot of troops. Looking at the palace that was still luxurious in the dark, and then looking at the man who was half kneeling a few steps away, bound by a light rope and unable to move, Su Salai pursed his lips. He really got into the game and became Snow Roland, the new emperor of the Roland Empire. So everything seen on that weird forum. Is it a case? Snow Roland, the NPC who was created with him as his prototype and was supposed to live in his place, was. Sishan was killed. Su Salai felt indescribably complicated. It's kind of weird, the feeling of overturning that I personally ruined my original plan. However, Su Salai could feel the dull pain in his chest, and the feeling of weakness after using the singing skill just now, and he took the armrest of the throne. Cold, hard, and terribly real to the touch. Is this world really just data? Why does everything seem so real? If it weren't for the data world, then what happened to the blood strip on Si Sheng's head? When he looked at Si Sheng, an accident happened suddenly. The man who was half kneeling on the ground suddenly raised his head. The grey-blue eyes turned dark gold in an instant, mysterious runes lit up from his face, and the blue veins protruding from the force were ferocious. At the same time, a powerful and invisible wind pressure cut through the air and swept towards Su Salai. Before Su Salai could react, the attack was already imminent. His pupils shrank suddenly, but the pain did not come. The strong wind pressure, when it was about to touch him, suddenly struck back at a more violent speed. Si Sheng was startled. With his hands tied and kneeling on one knee, he couldn't dodge at all. Facing the reverse attack, he could only bear it hard. 525,478. The critical strike value appeared above his head, and the blood bar also went halfway in an instant. Tick-tick. Si Sheng groaned, blood spilled from the corner of his mouth, dripped onto the floor tiles, and splashed several bright red blood flowers. The derivative skill of Capture Backlash, successfully activated. Backlash description: the captured target will not be able to attack you. When the captured target attacks you, it will suffer double damage from the attack and double the critical strike rate. Su Salai stared at the light screen in the void for a long time, and once again almost died, making his mood difficult to calm for a while. After a while, he looked at the man who was half kneeling on the ground. His military cap fell to the ground, his head was drooping, and there were blood stains on the corner of his mouth. Although he was described as embarrassed, his grey-blue eyes stared at Su Salai. Those fierce eyes reminded Su Salai of seeing him for the first time. The little slaves, who were barely clothed, were locked in a dirty and messy cage, even more embarrassed than they are now. At that time, according to the plot options, he rescued the child from the slave owner's hands. However, when the slave owner stepped forward to unshackle the child seized the gap and jumped up, biting off the slave owner's neck. This plot is too bloody, and since Si Sheng was born as a slave, the attributes in the early stage are too scumbag, and few players will cultivate him as the main card. However, Su Salai took a fancy to him at a glance. Facts proved that his judgment was correct, and in the middle and late stages, Si Sheng became his most powerful card. Even, because he was too fond of it, he even let the doctor import his game data into Starry Sky era. "You're going to kill me?" The silver-haired boy sitting on the throne, with a pair of beautiful violet-like eyes, looked down at Si Sheng from above. The purple eyes, under the refraction of the moonlight, flickered with a cold shimmer. Why? Su Salai didn't understand why Si Sheng wanted to kill him. And again, if he didn't have the capture skill, he might have died twice. But no matter it was the memory of Snow Roland or the setting of the game itself, Si Sheng should be loyal to him as an emperor. What went wrong? Si Sheng didn't answer him. The serious injury made him unable to maintain his half-kneeling posture at last. Although he tried his best to support him, he still fell softly. Si Sheng lay on his side on the ground, secretly mobilizing the energy in his body to repair the injury. He used the ultimate move, but he didn't expect it to affect him instead. He half squinted his eyes and looked at the silver-haired boy on the throne. The young man was also looking at him, his expression icy cold, different from his usual cowardly and bullying appearance. Si Sheng slightly twitched the corners of his mouth. "I've looked away. I've really looked away." Obviously the situation at the moment is very unfavorable for him, but there is no fear on his face. The rustling sounded, and the young man on the throne slowly stood up. Lightly stepping on the floor tiles with bare feet, the snow-white feet and the pure black floor tiles interweave into a picture with a strong visual conflict. Step by step, like a graceful cat, he silently approached his prey. He lowered his eyebrows, looking down condescendingly. Su Salai narrowed his lavender eyes. A person who was so powerful just now, but now the situation is reversed, and he is prostrate at his feet. However, he was not happy at all. Diddy, the crisp electronic sound suddenly sounded in the hall, which seemed very abrupt. Su Salai frowned, thinking it was the game system, but after searching carefully, he found that the sound came from his wrist. It was a watch-like thing, silver metal, very technical in style. Memories associated with the watch emerge. It's not a wristwatch, but a communicator aided by the Star Alliance. Star Alliance? Su Salai raised his eyebrows. Listening to the persistent beeping on the communicator, Su Salai finally followed his memory and pressed the connect button. A light blue curtain of light came from the communicator and hovered above his wrist. On the light curtain, a miniature figure appeared. Red eyes, dense green scales, an oval head and a pointed mouth. Is it a lizard man? Su Salai was stunned for a moment, and then his memory emerged. This lizardman was named Arnoldan, the leader of the Biwat Empire, and he came from a planet closest to Ixuxing, where the Roland Empire was located. Sino, good evening. Before Su Salai could sort out those memories, the lizard man on the light curtain had already spoken, and under the instant translation of the communication device, he easily understood his words. Looks like you can't sleep like I expected. Su Salai stared at Arnoldan, and when he sorted out the reason why the leader came to the door from his memory, his eyes were suddenly full of badness. Obviously, the lizardman leader didn't read his eyes. He continued, the spaceship has been arranged and will arrive at AI Swexing tomorrow. After you and your cronies leave in the spaceship, Biwat's army will fully take over Ixuxing. Su Salai pursed his lips. That's right, Snow Roland made a deal with the Belvat Empire he'd give Ash Sing his hands, and Arnoldan would provide him with a green card to the Flanders Federation, where he was no longer emperor, but he will enjoy a smooth and prosperous life. AI Swexing is the territory of the Roland Empire, but it is remote and the environment is harsh. After the natural disaster 100 years ago, the level of civilization has plummeted. In addition, 99% of the entire planet's territory is now occupied by interstellar beasts, and the difficulty of its development can be imagined. Therefore, Snow Roland, 1 month after he ascended the throne, resolutely decided to abandon his subjects and fly away. Su Salai's eyelashes drooped slightly, but inadvertently met a pair of eyes full of sarcasm and frost. After looking at Si Sheng for 2 seconds, Su Salai raised his eyes and looked at the ugly lizardman leader. "You don't need to come," the silver-haired boy said coldly, causing the two present to be startled at the same time. "Sino, do you know what you're talking about?" Arnoldan restrained his anger and whispered. "I am certain." Su Salai's face was gloomy. "I will not hand over Ai Swexing's authority to you. Although I don't quite understand what his current situation is, whether he really entered the game and turned into an NPC, but this planet, this empire, but he spent billions of dollars to buy it. His seat isn't hot yet, do you want him to give up? Dream it, there is everything in a dream." Arnoldan's lizard face couldn't see any micro-expressions. He said solemnly, "Roland, you have figured it out clearly. 1 month later is the day when the Star Alliance pays the alliance fee. If Ai Swexing can't pay, he will leave the protection of the Star Alliance. At that time, I, the Bivat Empire, will no longer have to abide by the rules of the Alliance, and I will lead a 1,000,000-star fleet." The light curtain suddenly disappeared, and the ugly lizardman finally disappeared in front of him. Su Salai turned off the communicator and breathed a sigh of relief. "It's so noisy. And it's not ugly, it's really hot eyes." Bowing his head, he looked at his boss Sheng. He just lay on the ground on his side, dressed in a snow-white military uniform. The buttons on his neck were cracked, and his hands were tied behind his back by a golden light rope. His short blonde hair was slightly messy, and there was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. A pair of grey-blue eyes flickered with complex shimmers, and instead of the sword drawn, he had a vague sense of beauty after being abused. Su Salai tutted lightly, but did not let his guard down. In just such a short time, Si Sheng's health bar had recovered by a quarter. He glanced at the golden light rope tied to his body, and explained according to Capture's skill that when the light rope was fused into Si Sheng's body, he would completely become his puppet. And as long as the skill effect is there, he can't hurt him. The purple eyes narrowed slightly. Su Salai raised his wrist and clicked on the communicator. "You want to kill me just because of this?" His face was icy cold, originally a clear boyish voice, but at this moment it was like being covered in frost and snow. Si Sheng restrained his expression. He looked back at the silver-haired boy lightly. Even though he was in prison, he didn't show any panic, as if he was sure that the boy couldn't hurt him. Su Salai was angry. He nearly lost his life twice tonight, and the person who started it turned out to be this virtuous. He raised his foot angrily and stepped on Si Sheng's chest, as if he had just stepped on himself, forcing Si Sheng to lie down completely on the ground. However, the blonde man did not show the painful expression he expected, but relaxed and comfortable, as if he was just cooperating with him, and fell to the ground. The boy's lips pursed into a straight line, and 2 clusters of small flames seemed to ignite in the depths of his purple eyes, burning and smoking. Su Salai suddenly raised his foot and stomped on Si Sheng's neck with such ferocity, as if he had to experience pain. However, attack is invalid. A big miss popped out from the top of Si Sheng's head. He couldn't even break Si Sheng's defense. Su Salai was stunned by his fighting power. Ah! At this time, the man who was bound to the ground gently twitched the corner of his mouth, and a faint smile appeared on his handsome and heroic face. Seeing Su Salai's eyes, he was full of ridicule. Su Salai stared at him coldly. The two stood and lay down, facing each other for a long time, not giving in to each other. Si Sheng looked at the little emperor with frizzy hair, his brows wrinkled imperceptibly. Just when he was a little distracted, a snow-white foot suddenly enlarged in front of him. The soft and cool solace of the young man stepped on him. On his cheeks, a little dust and breath rolled into his nostrils. Su Salai stepped on the man's right face, pressed it hard, and stepped on the other side of his cheek to the floor, and even ran over it with his front foot in retaliation. Fraud! He cursed lowly. Su Salai felt that he had been deceived. Anything to submit to him, anything to offer loyalty to him, is all false. He stomped on the man's face, venting the anger in his heart, as well as the fear of surviving twice. As for explaining to this Si Sheng, the one who committed the treasonous act was Sinyo Roland. He had just crossed over and had nothing to do with him? Isn't this funny? Not to mention whether this is the real Star Era, and whether he will be obliterated by the Game Master as a bug after he says it, just treat it as a real world, his situation is much more dangerous than a traitorous little emperor. Su Salai would not joke about his own life. Now he is Snow Roland is him, and the man in front of him is the mortal enemy who wants to kill him twice. Although looking at this face, he will inevitably feel heartache if this is really the era of the starry sky, then this guy was built by him and his family with money. However, what this guy did completely deviates from their imagination. Not only did he fail to protect Snow Roland, but he killed him with his own hands. Although now, this crisis has been temporarily resolved by him. Su Salai took a deep breath. Starry Era is a holographic game, God's Game is a mobile online game, and the Si Sheng in front of him is just a character recreated with reference to the data of his paper figurine. Although it was difficult, reason told him that the two must be separated. Thinking of something, Su Salai's eyes fell on the laser gun on the floor. He was about to lean over to pick it up, but he heard the sound of hurried footsteps outside the hall, followed by a loud bang. Several tall figures broke into the door. Pata-pata, the chandelier in the hall also suddenly turned on, and the bright light made Su Salai dazzled. He half squinted his eyes and looked at the few people who rushed in from outside the door. It was a group of soldiers wearing armor and holding long swords. They were solemn and majestic. At the forefront was a young man in blue military uniform with black hair and black eyes. His handsome facial features gave him a sense of familiarity. Su Salai blinked. Isn't this Li Zhechen, the captain of the guard? In God's Game, Li Zhechen is also one of the popular characters. He and the heroine are childhood sweethearts. When she encounters danger, she sacrifices herself many times to save her. She is a regular character with a gentle and loyal dog. Su Salai also owns this card, but he didn't take much effort to cultivate it. He was only 2.5 star level, and his strength was more than a bit worse than Si Sheng's. He looked at Li Zhechen and frowned slightly. So, in addition to Si Sheng, other characters in God's Game are also linked with Starry Era? In the real world, he hung up before he had time to discuss with the game team. Except for some incomplete information from future forums, he knew nothing about the game content and game mechanics. The sense of crisis cannot help but climb up the heart. The unknown can easily bring unease and fear. Perhaps he has to digest Snow Roland's memory first. His Majesty. When Su Salai was thinking about it, the head of the guard, who had a nervous expression, couldn't help being stunned after seeing the scene in the hall, and even the soldiers behind him stopped. From their point of view, they saw a silver-haired boy in a loose nightgown in the splendid golden hall, with a pair of white feet. He raised his right foot sullenly and stepped on the man's profile. As for the man lying on the ground, his hands and feet were tied by a light rope. Although he couldn't see his appearance, his white military uniform with gold threads. Li Zhechen's pupils shrank suddenly, and he had already guessed the identity of this man. When he raised his head slightly, he met the cold eyes of the silver-haired boy. Cold sweat could not help seeping out from his forehead, and it fell down his cheeks. Damn it, I disturbed His Majesty's yaxing. This subordinate retire. Su Salai? Before he could say anything, Li Zhechen turned around as fast as he could and waved the soldiers he brought back. The soldiers obeyed the order and retreated outside the door like a tide, but Li Zhechen did not dare to stay for long, falling behind and running away. Li Zhechen was not too worried about His Majesty's punishment. This young new emperor had not established his prestige soon after he ascended the throne. He and the people under his command had some respect for the new emperor, but not necessarily much awe. What really terrified him was the man in military uniform lying on the ground and letting the emperor step on his face. If he read it right, it should be the distinguished Duke of the Empire, the Grand Marshal known for his ruthlessness and power, and the patron saint of the Roland Empire Si Sheng. Now the Roland Empire is a real talker. So cool. In the middle of the night, the Marshal and the new Emperor actually did this kind of thing in the hall. Li Zhechen felt that he was about to finish, but he broke the relationship between His Majesty and the Marshal, and the incomparably powerful patroness was willing to crawl at His Majesty's feet, tying himself and letting him step on his face. This is so exciting. Li Zhechen didn't think that the little emperor had the strength to knock down the patron saint. After all, their new emperor was a downright ordinary person, weak and squeamish, but Lord Patronus once fought off the tide of beasts by himself, and saved the empire from water and fire in times of crisis. Unless the Marshal voluntarily, the scene in the main hall would not have happened at all. Li Zhechen was worried, but Su Salai was speechless. Is there something wrong with the head guard? When he sees the emperor being attacked, shouldn't he him immediately? Although he has already solved it by himself, is it too much to turn around and run like this? Being disturbed by him, Su Salai's anger was relieved a lot. Stop! He looked at the man in blue military uniform who was about to disappear at the door and said. Li Zhechen heard the cold voice of the young man, and there was a faint sound from behind him. The cold tone was not at all cowardly and cowardly. Your Majesty is also angry. Li Zhechen felt bitter in his heart and wanted to pretend he didn't hear it, but he just took a step when he heard the voice of the young man. Li Zhechen, come here for me. The tone of voice was flat, and there was not much emotion, but Li Zhechen's back was slightly stiff, and he did not dare to act rashly. Seeing the soldiers look back at him, Li Zhechen sighed, waved his hands to let the soldiers leave, turned around himself, and walked back with a dead face. Still didn't dare to get too close, and stopped at a distance of 5 or 6 meters. It was only at this time that he really saw the situation in the hall: the floor tiles that were dented and cracked, the throne where a gem was blown up, and blood stains. Li Zhechen's heart skipped a beat, and his expression became serious and suspicious. Seeing the chief guard walking back with interest, Su Salai ignored him and looked down at the man on the ground. His face was very hot, and the temperature came slowly, ironing his slightly cold feet, and the tender touch. It seemed that this guy had good skin. Curling his lips, Su Salai slowly retracted his feet. Si Sheng closed his eyes, as if he had fainted, and there were faint lines of light on Jun Yi's face. I just passed out, and I don't know if it was pretending or not. On the other hand, Li Zhechen was even more frightened. Because he saw the blood on the corner of Si Sheng's mouth. The blood on the ground turned out to be Si Sheng's. As powerful as the Marshal, he was injured and bound to the ground. Li Zhechen lowered his head and did not dare to look directly at the young emperor in front of him, but his heart was like a stormy wave, and he could not calm down for a long time. Su Salai looked at Si Sheng a few times, then continued to bend over to pick up the laser gun on the ground and play with it. As soon as the gun was touched, the associated memory came to mind. In AI Swexing, where resources are scarce, there are not many guns, especially this one, as the gun for the Duke and the Grand Marshal. The configuration is also top. Anyway, Snow Roland has been eyeing this laser gun for a long time. Radium 4000 description: the 10th generation laser gun, produced in Flanders Star Federation, standard equipment quality, silver effect. Each hit will cause 2500300 points of physical damage, 500100 points of light damage, with a 5% crit damage bonus. Durability, 90 energy, 86% owner. Sishan. Seeing that the attribute panel of the laser gun suddenly appeared in front of him, Su Salai was a little curious. Is he now an NPC in the game? Can all NPCs view equipment attributes, see other people's health bars, or is it just him special? Su Salai roughly looked at the value of the laser gun. Compared to Si Sheng's HP of more than 1 million, the maximum attack of 4000 is just like a joke, and it may not be able to break his defense, let alone kill him. As Su Salai moved in his heart, his personal panel popped up. Sino Roland status, NPC faction leader affiliation, Roland Empire age, 18 personal level, LV2 distance upgrade, 0/300 HP, 2480/3000 mana, 0/600 attributes, physical, 3, intelligence, 12, strength, 3, spirit, 12, agility, 2, defense, 2, element affinity. Tone Su Salai just glanced at it, and the meaning of each attribute came to his mind. The physique represents the blood volume, the intelligence represents the magic value, the strength represents the physical damage, the spirit corresponds to the element damage, and the agility represents the speed and dodge. As for defense, it's damage reduction. For example, he just stepped on Si Sheng, but was judged to be a miss, because Si Sheng's defense was too high, and all the damage he caused was reduced. There is also a conversion formula between attributes and various values. This is not explained, and it has to be explored later. After understanding it, Su Salai glanced at his attribute panel again. I have to say, it's rubbish, except for intelligence and spirit, other points are pitiful. 3 points of physique is 3000 points of health, which can't even stop Si Sheng's shot, and he is not yet full of blood. It is estimated that he has just been stepped on by Si Sheng. Thinking of this, Su Salai couldn't help but recall the thrill just now he was almost shot in the head. The more Su Salai thought about it, the more afraid he became. Si Sheng is really too strong. He stepped on him with more than 500 blood. If he did a few more hits, he would die, not to mention the latter skill. He lost 50 W and blood at a glance. This is the legendary star who died? If it weren't for the backlash from the arrest, he might be dead now. Su Salai narrowed his eyes. This Si Sheng is not his paper-making person, not the cub who spent countless hard work and money training him and spent more than 300 days and nights with him. Looking at this face, it is false to say that there is no emotion, but only if he can't hurt him, can't threaten his life. Su Salai weighed in his heart. A boss-level powerhouse like Si Sheng is too dangerous for him. He is now a mortal enemy. If he can't control it, he will kill him sooner or later. Maybe he should reverse the customer first, think of a way to kill him first? Su Salai remembered seeing on the future forum that the NPC of Starry Era is really dead when it dies, and it will not be refreshed or reappeared. Here, he has only one life. He finally regained a healthy body and was resurrected from the dead. How could he be willing to die so easily? Even if he lives in a virtual game world, he is willing. Yes, he wants to live, not to die. The silver hair was gently blown by the night wind, and the atmosphere became a little depressed. The purple-eyed boy looked down at the man on the ground, his face was cold and his eyes flickered. Really? Still kill it? However, how to kill? This guy has thick blood and high defense, even if he stands and kills him, he can't kill him. His Majesty. Li Jiechen looked at him from the side, and finally couldn't help but speak. Su Salai glanced at him, then suddenly reached out and handed the gun to Li Jiechen. You. Su Salai paused for a moment, forced to overcome his own psychological barrier, and whispered, "Kill him." As a civilized person from a peaceful era, he couldn't do this, not to mention that he was too weak to even break Si Sheng's defense, but he could use a knife to kill people. In the empty hall, Li Jiechen's hand holding the gun couldn't help but tremble. What's the situation? Let him kill Si Sheng? His most beloved patron saint? Your Majesty, are you kidding me? He couldn't help but said. However, looking at the expression on the boy's face, Li Jiechen was horrified to discover that he might be serious. Su Salai looked at him, pursed his lips and said, "He wants to kill me." Then, he saw Li Jiechen shaking his head and said decisively, "Impossible, there should be some misunderstanding in this." His reaction was too strong, and Su Salai couldn't help but be cautious. Yes, whether it was the original intention of creating Si Sheng in the game, or from the memory of Snow Roland, Si Sheng was absolutely loyal to the Roland royal family. As for Yi Sishan's current status and prestige in the Roland Empire, no matter who he is, probably cannot accept that he was executed inexplicably. Even if the emperor insisted that he was assassinated, convincing evidence was needed. From Li Jechen's attitude, Su Salai clearly recognized this. So, why did Si Sheng want to kill the little emperor? Because the little emperor betrayed the country. Once this reason is exposed, it is completely conceivable to imagine the consequences for him who has inherited the identity of Snow Roland. So, this approach doesn't work. Su Salai gritted his teeth secretly, and could only nod his head. Yes, there should be a misunderstanding. Li Jechen breathed a sigh of relief. If even Lord Patronus betrayed Roland, then this country might really have no hope. He thought so in his heart, but didn't dare to say it. Su Salai has been observing him, and seeing the change in his expression, his heart shuddered again. Even his chief guard, who was supposed to be the little emperor's most caring person, was like this, not to mention others. He thought for a while and said, for the sake of Marshal Si Sheng's reputation, tonight's affairs should be kept secret and not allowed to be publicized. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Jechen said respectfully. Then, he couldn't help but look at the blond man on the ground, and asked cautiously, the Marshal is now. Su Salai was about to say that he would go to prison, but after thinking about it, he stopped again. There is no reason to put the Marshal of a country in prison for no reason, but once Si Sheng wakes up and tells others, the little emperor's treason will be exposed. Judging from Si Sheng's exploits and the little emperor's performance just a month after he ascended the throne, who would most people believe? It goes without saying. Just thinking about it made Su Salai a headache. He had to change his mind and said, take it to my bedroom first. According to the skill tips, when the light rope is completely absorbed by Si Sheng, he will be able to completely control him, so he shouldn't have to worry about him talking nonsense, right? With the backlash skills, there is no need to worry about him violently hurting people. Su Salai did not continue to stay here. The night was as cold as water. He stepped barefoot on the floor tiles. It was icy cold, and his feet that had been warmed up became cold again. According to the memory he received, he walked in the direction of the bedroom. Li Jechen's expression was a little strange, but he still bent down and lifted the man on the ground. His eyes were tightly closed, and he probably really lost consciousness. And Su Salai, he walked in front. Facing the cool night wind, looking at some dazzling lights in the corridor, and feeling the faint pain in his chest, he really couldn't think of this place as a virtual world. Maybe for him now, this is already real. Back in the bedroom, the guards at the door saw him and glanced at each other in shock. Obviously they didn't find out when Snow Roland left. Su Salai was speechless for a while. If an assassin comes, can these NPCs really protect him? He ignored the expressions of these people and walked straight into the bedroom. The Emperor's bedroom is luxurious and stylish. The decoration is full of classical European style. It has a sense of historical vicissitudes, but in some details, there are traces of future technology. It's like the communicator he wears on his hand. The old and the new are intertwined, and the contradictions are unified. The reason for this is to start with the history of the Roland Empire. Ai Swexing, where the Roland Empire is located, once gave birth to a very powerful advanced magical civilization. People can use the power of elements to create all kinds of incredible things and skills. And such people are called elementalists on Ai Swexing. Mysterious and powerful, they are deeply embraced and loved, and after spreading the brilliance of elemental magic all over the planet, the elementalists set their sights on alien planets. Elementalists set foot in the interstellar space, wandering among the various planets, and began to explore and study the universe for thousands of years. After unremitting efforts, about 100 years ago, A.I. Swexing, who originated as an elemental master, passed the audit and officially became a member of the Interstellar Alliance, and was recognized by other member states. As for A.I. Swexing, who has many national forces, after joining the Interstellar Alliance, as the speed of development has increased again, there is a vague trend of general unification. It is a pity that before the Great Reunification, A.I. Swexing first ushered in a disaster. About 10 years after joining the Star Alliance, a natural disaster came, and countless countries were destroyed in that disaster. In the end, only the most powerful Roland Empire survived. A.I. Swexing's civilization level has plummeted since then. Although it will not return to primitive society, it is undoubtedly far behind compared to other rapidly developing civilizations. After the natural disaster, A.I. Swexing was occupied by countless interstellar beasts, becoming the poorest and most dangerous area in the Interstellar Alliance. However, under the running operation of countless elementalists, A.I. Swexing was not expelled by the Interstellar Alliance, but received assistance from the Alliance. This allowed the severely damaged Roland Empire to survive and become the owner of this planet. However, the Roland Empire did not rise again. After 100 years of ups and downs, the elemental masters who were born in A.I. Swexing either died of old age or joined other interstellar forces. Until now, A.I. Swexing has completely declined. To make matters worse, it is now facing the coveting of its old neighbor, the Bivat Empire. If you really can't pay the Star Alliance's dues, and you can't get shelter, the collapse of civilization may not be far away. This is an external worry, and an internal problem is equally difficult. At present, there are only 5 main cities left in the Roland Empire, and these 5 main cities are still surrounded by interstellar beasts, and they cannot even communicate with each other. Susalai endured the pain between his brows and recalled the memories he had received. This is Sinyo Roland's understanding of the world, and it is also helping him to quickly sort out the current situation. Behind him, Li Jechen hesitated for a while, but he carried the man on his back, and followed him carefully into the palace of His Majesty the Emperor. Hearing the movement, Susalai calmed down, relieved his headache, and said lightly, "Put him down, you can go." "Yes, Your Majesty." Li Jechen responded respectfully. He walked aside, gently placed Si Sheng on the chair by the window, and adjusted his posture so that he could sit more comfortably. Regardless of the specific circumstances, Si Sheng is the patron saint of the Roland Empire. Without him, the imperial city would have been breached by interstellar beasts 3 years ago, and the Roland Empire might no longer exist. So within the scope of his ability, Li Jechen is willing to do more for him. Susalai took the radium 4000 and walked to the edge of the bed to sit down. He is also a shooting enthusiast. When he has nothing to do, he will go to the shooting range to play. He is a little excited when he touches this laser gun. Is this the high-tech product of the future interstellar? Although, his owner is Si Sheng. Thinking of Si Sheng, he looked to the window. Li Jechen was still beside the man, as if he wanted to stay and guard. He frowned slightly, thought about it, and kicked him out loudly. With this chief guard around, many things are inconvenient. Once Si Sheng wakes up and says something to him, he will have one more trouble to solve. However, Li Jechen did not act. He glanced at the gun in the boy's hand and hesitated. He could probably guess what he was thinking. Susalai twitched the corners of his mouth. "Do you think I would do anything to him?" he said lightly, with the strength of the marshal. "Do you think a mere laser gun can handle him?" As he said that, he suddenly raised his hand, and in Li Jechen's terrified eyes, he shot Si Cheng Huan. The light flickered slightly, and the laser bullet accurately hit the man's forehead, causing his head to be forced to the side. 21 caused 21 points of light damage to Si Sheng. Susalai snorted secretly. Sure enough, this guy's physical defense and magic defense are terrifyingly high, and the damage reduction is too much, and the laser gun can't help him at all. Having said that, his arm dangling in front of him trembled imperceptibly. This was the first time he had shot at a living person. As for Li Jechen, he had already picked up the man's head and looked at it, and found that apart from a little bruise on his forehead, there was really nothing at all, and the heart that he mentioned was put down. Looking at the little emperor again, his mood became a little complicated. He did not expect that this young new emperor, who usually looks weak and bullying, actually dared to shoot the marshal. Could it be that the marshal really did something to him that caused his temperament to change drastically? Li Jechen guessed like this, and did not dare to stay for a long time. He respectfully withdrew from the emperor's bedroom. When he came to the corridor, he glared at the guards at the door, telling them to be more vigilant and not make any mistakes. Afterwards, he returned to the main hall the same way, ready to go to see the traces of the scene again. In the empty and deserted bedroom, only Su Salai and Si Sheng were left. Su Salai sat down on the edge of the bed, relaxed slightly, and let out a sigh of relief. From the plane crash to turning into a star, from falling into the starry sky to becoming the emperor of the game world, to encountering a crisis, he almost survived twice. It all happened so fast. Looking back now, it feels like a dream. But Su Salai knew clearly that this was all real, not his imagination. Moreover, if he wants to live in this different world, there are still a lot of problems and troubles waiting for him to solve. Now is not the time to relax. Just about to go to take a look at Si Sheng's situation, he caught a glimpse of his feet hanging by the bed, and could vaguely see the dirt on the soles of his feet. Sino Roland was worried that the footsteps made after wearing his shoes would alarm the guards, so he went out barefoot. Well, he just came back barefoot, of course. The sticky and dirty feeling made Su Salai, who has always loved cleanliness, show a trace of disgust and irritability in his eyes. Su Salai hesitated for a moment, and finally called the maid. After a while, Janice, the head maid, followed his instructions and walked in with two maids. The unconscious Si Sheng was hidden in the shadows. They did not find him, but came to Su Salai without looking sideways and saluted respectfully. "See your Majesty." Janice had red hair and red eyes. In Snow Roland's memory, she was a strict and disciplined woman who had been by his side since childhood, and was like a mother to him. At this moment, she took the hot water from the maid's hand, squatted at Su Salai's feet, and wanted to wash his feet. Su Salai shrank his feet and sat cross-legged on the bed. "No need, put things down, and you go out." Janice got up obediently, but before leaving, she paused again hesitantly, looking at Su Salai with red eyes. A trace of sadness and despair appeared. The other two maids looked at her suspiciously. "Mary, Jenna, you go back to your room first," Janice whispered to them. After they left, Janice closed the door, came to Su Salai, and knelt on the ground. Su Salai sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Janice in confusion. "His Majesty." The woman lay on the ground and said in a wailing voice, "I'm afraid Janice will not be able to follow you away, and will not be able to take care of you in the future. I hope your Majesty will cherish it." Following her words, Su Salai also remembered. Snow Roland was originally going to leave tomorrow, Arnolden allowed him to bring his cronies, and Janice was the one he wanted to take. Su Salai sighed. Having seen Snow Roland's memory, he can actually understand his thoughts. Snow Roland was the same as him, ranking third, with an older brother and an older sister ahead of him, but 3 years ago, the interstellar beast invaded, and both of them died in that disaster. Therefore, after the old emperor died of illness, he was driven to the shelf to inherit the throne. Although he was a prince, Snow Roland was not favored, and even lived a hard life. Because he is an ordinary person and has no talent for elemental masters, although he does not need to go to the battlefield to defend his family and the country like his brother and sister, he does not enjoy the resources that a prince should have. And the old emperor not only never gave him any favors, he never taught him anything, and before his death, he even emptied the treasury. A dignified interstellar empire, but it can't even get the 10 million cosmic coins as an alliance fee, so that it will face the invasion of aliens in a month. It was only human nature for Sino Roland to want to quit. And now, this mess fell on Su Salai's head. What else could he do? Hand over AI Swexing to others? That is of course impossible. Not to mention that after the game is launched, AI Swexing, who is a novice village, will welcome a group of immortal players. After the game starts, the eldest brother and the second brother should come to him, right? And parents, they will also come into the game, right? According to the information seen in the future forum, Snow Roland died more than a month before the first internal test of Starry Era, referring to about tonight. In other words, after more than a month, the first internal test will be opened, and there will be real people coming into the game to find him. And it's most likely the Su family. Su Salai's heart skipped a beat. That's right, he can still see his parents and brothers again, and he can also reunite with them in the game. He must live in this world and live well, and not let them be sad and disappointed as he saw in the future forum. Therefore, AI Swexing must not be lost. Only here, only Snow Roland, who is the Emperor, can be quickly found by them. The lavender eyes light up slightly, with hope and expectation. The silver-haired boy looked at the headmaid in front of him, grinned slightly, and smiled. Si Sheng woke up from the coma, and when he opened his eyes, what he saw was this scene. It was quiet in the huge bedroom. Only one or two of the chandeliers were on, and the moonlight poured in from the open windows, casting a thin veil over everything. The silver-haired boy who smiled brightly also became hazy in the moonlight. Si Sheng frowned slightly, looked away, and looked around quietly. This is the little emperor's bedroom, why is he here? The memory before fainting came to mind. It was a tender white foot, enlarged in front of him, and finally crushed on his face. Si Sheng narrowed his eyes, anger and ice flashed in his eyes. Janice, I've changed my mind. At this time, the youthful voice came again, and Si Sheng looked over. The little emperor has restrained his smile, looked down at the woman in front of him, and spoke slowly. That casual look was more unpredictable than the usual weakness and cowardice. Si Sheng's heart moved, his eyebrows raised slightly. The head maid, who was lying on the ground, was already desperate. Hearing the words, she couldn't help but raised her head and looked at him for unknown reasons. Janice said, "Your Majesty means I'm not ready to go." The boy pursed his lips slightly, and there was a firm power in his voice. "I'll stay and work things out." Janice was stunned. After being stunned at first, she suddenly burst into tears of joy. "Your Majesty, are you really willing to stay?" She was a little surprised, but she quickly became worried. "But isn't this too dangerous? And your Majesty has not promised the leader of the Baivat Empire." "It's okay, don't worry about him. I have already rejected him. Tomorrow." Su Salai touched his chin. "Their starship shouldn't come, right? AI Swexing didn't mean to come or just go. Because of the natural disaster 100 years ago, countless countries were destroyed, and the Roland Empire also suffered heavy losses. The remaining 99% of the territory has been occupied by interstellar beasts and has become the habitat of various exotic beasts. Star beasts are aliens and disasters to the people of the Roland Empire, but they are also a protective barrier. Moreover, there is a special magnetic field outside AI Swexing, which prevents people inside the planet from going out, and makes it difficult for people outside to enter. If they forcibly invade, the overlords of this sky will definitely make the invaders taste despair. Su Salai felt that the Baiward Empire probably didn't think about attacking, and probably planned to release the military power with a glass of wine, and let Sino Roland take the initiative to hand over the power. In this way, they can enter the Roland Empire through the safe passage laid by the Star Alliance, easily annex the Roland Empire and become the masters of Ixuxing without a single soldier. Therefore, even if he rejected Arnolden, the Baivat Empire should not take a storm in the short term. Of course, if the Roland Empire really loses the protection of the Interstellar Alliance after a month, the safe passage will likely be mastered by the Byward Empire, and everything will be difficult to say at that time. His Majesty. In front of Susalai, Janice was still kneeling on the ground. She looked up at the boy, her eyes were very complicated, she was both happy and worried about the future. She is also aware of the situation of the Roland Empire, so she can understand His Majesty's desire to leave, but her homeland is difficult to leave. At the last moment, Janice chose to stay. As for His Majesty, she really wanted him to be free. This aging country is too heavy for him, who is only 18 years old. He has not enjoyed the treatment of many princes, so how can he force him to bear such a mountain-like responsibility? But Janice didn't expect that when she was about to say goodbye to him, the boy would say something like this to her. He said he would not go. He will stay and solve all problems. Janice couldn't express her feelings. I just feel that she has looked at the prince who grew up since she was a child, and it seems that something is different. Maybe he was still very young, but instead of running away, he chose to bravely stay and take on it. Janice's thoughts were surging, and she suddenly raised her hand to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. Her eyes became very firm. Your Majesty, no matter what you plan to do next, I will always stand by your side. Even if you die, Janice will follow your Majesty without hesitation. Ding. Janice's favorability has been raised to swear to the death, and the loyal fans of the Roland Empire Camp +1. The faction system opens. The favorability system is turned on. Susalai looked at the light screen that suddenly popped up in front of him, and couldn't help but startled. Faction system? Affinity system? Having played the game for so many years, of course he knows what these two are, but isn't it the players? NPCs too? He tried to think about the faction system, and a new light screen appeared in front of him. Susalai glanced slightly, then looked at Janice, who was still kneeling on the ground. The label of a diehard fan appeared on her head, which made him feel a little weird. Because there are parentheses after the diehard fans, which reads, Mother fans. Susalai. Forget it, it's a mother fan. He was at a time when he was short of manpower, and at least he was sure that Janice could be trusted, which was also a windfall. But this label is so annoying. As Susalai thought about it, the label of the diehard fan suddenly disappeared. He blinked and continued to try, only to find that the label appeared again. Is it controlled by brain waves? Looking at Janice again, Susalai's mood was a little complicated. He calmed down and said to her, Well, very good, Janice. Thank you for your support, and I hope you won't disappoint me in the future. Then, he sent her away. Watching Janice leave and closing the door of the bedroom, Susalai put down his legs and reached out to gently roll up his trousers, revealing a pair of calves that were as white as jade without any scars. In addition to living a hard life, Snow Roland was actually well protected, but he probably didn't want such protection. Susalai looked at his current body. His legs were very similar to his original shape, his hands and feet were also familiar, that is, so white. He stuck his head out and looked at his reflection in the basin. The boy with silver hair and purple eyes, except for the color of his hair and eyes, is 90% similar to his original appearance, but he is much more immature. 18. I didn't expect to be young after death. Susalai shrugged and stepped his cool feet into the hot tub. The soles of his feet touched the surface of the water lightly, and the scalding temperature jumped up from the bottom to the top of his head, causing him to shiver. Then, he slowly soaked his feet completely in the water, slowly closed his eyes, and sighed comfortably. Susalai only felt that his whole body was wrapped in warmth, and all the coldness was dispelled. He fell back on the bed, opened his eyes slowly, recited the faction system in his heart, and a light blue screen appeared in front of him. Sino Roland status, NPC faction leader affiliation, Roland Empire, Star Alliance territory, Ixuxing. The three words AI Swexing are protruding, as if there is content to click in. Susalai's gaze fell on AI Swexing, and as his thoughts moved, another detailed introduction popped up. AI Swexing belonging to Roland Empire land area, about 1 billion square kilometers land development rate, less than 0.12% population, 90 million plus cities, 5, Imperial City, Lanyu City, Langxing City, Lihai City, Duskfrost City. The 5 cities in parentheses had nothing to do with Snow Roland's memory. Susalai touched his chin and looked at the city introduction. Except for the Imperial City, which is level 2, the other 4 main cities are level 1. Each city has a panel introduction, and various values are updated in real time. Susalai focused on the land area. The combined area of these 5 main cities is more than 1.2 million square kilometers. Looking at these values, he barely grasped the real feeling of a planet and dominating a country. As for the low level of the main city, Susalai is not surprised. These 5 main cities are obviously 5 novice villages. Since it is a novice village, the level and specifications cannot be too high. It is estimated that there will be a city upgrade game in the follow-up. Thinking like this, Susalai continued to look down. Number of troops, 1 million plus army combat strength, 2 stars personal reputation, respect popular support rate, 52%, if lower than 50%, it is likely to cause a civil unrest, diehard fans, 2 seeing 52% of the people's approval rate, Susalai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He quickly looked at the explanation of the uprising. Democracy. When the popular support rate is lower than a certain value, the people of the camp have a chance to take drastic measures to overthrow the rule of the leader of the faction. Oh, it's just raising troops to protest, right? Is Si Sheng's rebellion a kind of people's uprising? But the approval rate is not lower than 50%. Susalai pursed his lips, and the happy and relaxed mood dissipated a lot at once. Originally, I thought that I could earn 10 million cosmic coins, and after paying the alliance fee, I would be able to reunite with my family in the first internal test. Susalai suddenly felt a sense of crisis that his life would not be guaranteed at any time. The numbers behind the diehard fans are also raised, and they should be able to see the specific information. Sure enough, as he moved his thoughts, a new interface appeared again. This is an interface with a picture. The words "Die Loyal Fan" are written on the top. There are 2 avatars below, and the names are written under the avatars. At the front was a short-haired child with black hair and purple eyes, but Janice was going to the back instead. Joan Roland. Looking at the avatar and name, a memory emerged in Susalai's mind. This is the half-brother of Snow Roland, who is only 10 years old this year, and the child who was pushed to the throne after the death of Snow Roland. Susalai frowned slightly, feeling a little surprised. Because in Snow Roland's memory, his relationship with this younger brother was not a good one. This younger brother, Joan, turned out to be a diehard fan of Sinyo. The system won't go wrong, right? Susalai opens Kyung's details. Joan Roland status, younger brother of the new emperor affiliation, Roland Empire age, 10 years old personal level, LV5 HP, 7000/7000 mana, 600/600 attributes, physical, 7, intelligence, 12, strength, 7, spirit, 12, agility, 9, defense, 5, elemental affinity. Dark Susalai blinked. As a brother, he is 8 years older than Kyung, and his level is only 2, but this little guy is already level 5? Take another look at your attributes: physical, 3, intelligence, 12, strength, 2, spirit, 12, agility, 6, defense, 2. Okay, except for the intellect and spirit, it's all crushed by the little brother. However, it can also be seen that Snow Roland's initial intelligence and spirit are very high. Even if there is a difference of 3 levels, he can still be on par with his younger brother. Susalai was speechless. After thinking about it, I didn't care too much. Anyway, it's my own brother, so it's okay to be strong. In the past, he was the youngest in the whole family, and everyone regarded him as a child. Now that he has a cheap brother, Susalai is quite happy. Of course, he has to improve his strength as soon as possible later, whether it is to save face or save his life, strength is the last word. Afterwards, Susalai glanced at Janice's profile again. What surprised him was that the head maid was already level 15. Compared with him and Joan Roland, the data was frighteningly high. Janice occupation, head maid affiliation, Roland Empire age, 41 level, LV15 HP, 40,000/40,000 mana, 650/650 attributes, physical, 40, intelligence, 13, strength, 28, spirit, 12, agility, 20, defense, 30, element affinity, water occupation. Warrior Susalai blinked, and related memories came to his mind. As mentioned before, AI Swexing is the origin of elemental masters, and elemental masters are also subdivided into two categories. One is a warrior who tempers himself with elements and enhances his individual strength, that is, a physical elementalist, and the other is a mage who releases skills by manipulating elements, also known as a spiritual elementalist. They have different talents, which are divided into 5 conventional talents of gold, wood, water, fire, and soil, and 5 rare talents of wind, thunder, light and dark sound. Because of the natural disaster 100 years ago, AI Swexing's elements are now thin, and only those with extraordinary talents can grow into a truly powerful elemental master. Elementalists are often recruited by the army to resist the invasion of interstellar beasts. The existence of an elementalist can sometimes be compared to an army. Susalai pondered the memory obtained, and probably understood that this was the career system of the game. His element affinity is sound, and his talent skill is singing, which should be related to sound. I don't know how to practice. As an NPC, can you upgrade by killing monsters like a player? If he could, that would be to his advantage. Looking at the night, Susalai suppressed the thought of going out and trying. It's too late, he just crossed over, so don't make too many strange actions to cause suspicion. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Looking at Janice's panel again at this moment, Susalai couldn't help grinning. Unexpectedly, Janice, a woman who looked weak, turned out to be a water elementalist who practiced martial arts. He was a little surprised. At least with her by his side, his safety will be guaranteed during this time. Of course, if he encounters a pervert like Si Sheng, he is still very dangerous. Tonight, a blind cat met a dead mouse, and he activated the capture skill. But what about next time? Capture. Although this skill is powerful, it uses up all his magic power in one hit. And the cooldown time is long too. Susalai frowned in distress, and sat up with his arms on the mattress. After soaking for a while, the water in the basin is still warm, as if this basin has a constant temperature function. Susalai retracted his feet, one leg was hanging on the edge of the bed, and the other was retracted. While wiping with a towel, he thought about what he needed to do next. The first is to improve his strength and save his life, the second is the alliance fee of 10 million cosmic coins, and finally there is the increase in the popularity of the public. The public support rate is not in a hurry, nor is it in a hurry. In terms of strength, I will try tomorrow to see if I can beat monsters and upgrade. If not, I will find an elemental master to teach him how to cultivate. And the most troublesome thing is 10 million cosmic coins. AI Swexing has its own currency system, called AI Swexcoin. Because the Roland Empire is too weak, AI Swexcoin has no value between the stars, and even the Interstellar Alliance does not accept it. So I can only earn universe coins by myself to fill this hole. In the real world, Susalai doesn't worry about money at all, it's only 10 million, not to mention the Su family, he will earn it back by holding a few concerts by himself. But here is the era of starry sky. He was unfamiliar with his life, and even in Snow Roland's memory, there was very little information about alien planets, let alone how to make money. So hard. Su Salai was a little worried. He was thinking about something, and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Su Salai looked up sharply, and suddenly met a pair of grey-blue eyes. I saw the man sitting by the window, not knowing when he woke up. His hands and feet were still bound. The moonlight shone in from the open window, the curtains were blown away by the wind, and half of the man's face was hidden in the shadows, making the cold and violent grey-blue eyes even more eerie. Su Salai's heart was beating wildly. This is intimidating. When it calmed down, a wave of anger mixed with a bit of depression and grievance, just like this came to my heart. Treating Si Sheng, a paper man, Su Salai asked himself to dig out his heart and lungs, but now that he enters the game, he doesn't help him even if he doesn't help him, and he will kill him as soon as he comes? Even if his reason told him that this Si Sheng was just a character created by reference to his paper man, Su Salai couldn't bear it. What if he recreated it? Without him and without his family, this Si Sheng would not exist at all. It can't be that strong. His strength all originated from him, but now it has become the biggest obstacle to his survival. Negative emotions exploded in an instant. Su Salai threw down the towel in his hand, got up and walked towards Si Sheng. Si Sheng stared at the young man in the distance, watched him get out of bed, and came to him step by step. The moonlight shone on his face from the window, outlining his handsome features with icy lines. Su Salai looked at Si Sheng coldly. He paid so much effort for the man in front of him, but what he finally got was a death threat. How can he swallow this breath? Looking at the footprints on Si Sheng's face, he narrowed his eyes, raised his foot again, and stepped on the other side. Stepping on the face is not very harmful, but extremely insulting. If he couldn't beat him, he couldn't kill him, so Su Salai could only choose to vent his anger in this way. However, the accident happened. When his foot was about to step on Si Sheng's handsome face, the light rope tied to Si Sheng's body suddenly disappeared, and a big palm lifted up and held him firmly. That palm was hot and thick, and the callus on the palm was a little rough, so it wrapped the sole of his foot, and the sole of his sole stepped firmly on the other's big palm. Then, the man held him like this and stood up slowly. The tall figure enveloped him, full of oppression. The night wind whistled, rolling the curtains and flying. The clouds in the sky were completely blown away, revealing a silvery white moon, and the quiet light illuminated the bedroom brightly. Under this moonlight, the man who was hidden in the shadows completely revealed his handsome appearance. Perfect facial features, handsome and extraordinary. Unfortunately, a faint grey footprint on the side of the face ruins this beauty. At this moment, the man held the boy's feet, and his blue-grey eyes stared at him coldly. Without saying a word, it was even more terrifying. Su Salai recovered. Wait, why did the light rope suddenly disappear? Su Salai was shocked. Is this a skill failure, or has it been absorbed successfully? There was no prompt from the system, so he couldn't judge for a while, but barely kept his composure on his face. Under the cool white moonlight, the young man's lavender eyes glowed with coldness, and he confronted Si Sheng without showing weakness. It's just that no matter what, there is no way to eliminate the embarrassment at the moment. At this moment, he is still holding one leg, his foot is tightly held by Si Sheng, similar to the action of kicking his legs and stopping in the air. Su Salai gritted his teeth, let go. He shouted coldly, his expression fierce, but his voice was kept very low by him, obviously unwilling to disturb others. However, Si Sheng raised his eyebrows slightly, not only did not let go, he even took a step forward. Damn! Su Salai cursed secretly and was forced to raise his leg again. Accompanied by this difficult movement, the ligament in the inner thigh felt like a torn pain. There was no way, he couldn't care about his posture anymore. He started to jump back on one foot, on the one hand to relieve the pain, on the other hand, he wanted to break free from Si Sheng's restraint. As a result, when he jumped back, the man held the palm of his foot and pushed forward. Suddenly Su Salai felt a huge force coming. He lost control in an instant, and he kept backing away under the influence of inertia. He waved his arms subconsciously, trying to find a balance, but he didn't stabilize his body until his leg socket hit the edge of the bed. So, just flip back. With long silver hair flying, Su Salai fell onto the bed like this, dizzy from the fall. You fucking. The following swear words are not complete. Covering the back of his head and opening his eyes, he saw the blond man quietly coming to the bedside, his blue-grey eyes, indifferent and silent, looking down at him condescendingly. Su Salai's heart beat wildly again. Feeling the danger, he quickly turned over and crawled forward, trying to escape from the other side of the bed. Sadly, as soon as he climbed out a little, he felt the man's palm grab one of his calves. When he just washed his feet, he turned up the cuffs of his trousers. At this moment, his calf was caught. The man's palm was against his cold skin, which was terrifyingly hot. Su Salai looked back and glared at Si Sheng through gritted teeth. Si Sheng ignored his gaze, and with a little force, slowly dragged his body back. Su Salai grabbed the edge of the bed and tried hard to break free, but with the level gap between Signor Roland and Si Sheng, he couldn't resist at all. In this way, Su Salai was forced to return to the man's side, watching him kneel on the bed, leaning over and pressing him. The pressure is getting stronger. Su Salai blushed and couldn't help but gritted his teeth and raised his other free leg, kicking the man's chest with the soles of his feet without any effort, but pain. Su Salai took a deep breath. Damn, why are you so hard? I feel like my legs are going to break. At this time, Si Sheng's figure paused, but he let go of his calf, but then turned to grab the foot he stepped on his chest, pressed forward like this, and leaned forward again. This is a more difficult exercise that tests flexibility than the high leg raise just now. As for Snow Roland, it was obvious that he didn't exercise much at ordinary times. Su Salai felt that the ligament was about to rupture. He had tears in his eyes. Damn, he has never been so wronged before. It's just that he refused to show weakness, so he could only grit his teeth tightly to prevent himself from screaming. The blond man stared at him, tilted his head slightly, and lightly parted his thin lips. Just now, did this foot step on it? The deep and magnetic voice was familiar to Su Salai, but it made him horrified at this moment. I saw the man talking, his eyes fell on the soles of his feet, the palms gently rubbed the soles of his feet, and the pulp of his fingers stroked the soles of his feet. That gentle and slow movement made Su Salai feel goosebumps all over his body. What does this pervert want? Wouldn't it be about crushing his feet? With Si Sheng's strength and cruelty, Su Salai fully believed that he could do it. When he was a little slave, he was bitten to death as soon as he was rescued, beating and scolding his slave owner, let alone now. What to do now? Why didn't he think about it in the first place and asked the doctor to import Si Sheng's data into the Starry Sky era? Su Salai now regrets it, very much. In the face of such a powerful NPC who wants to kill him, what else can he do to save himself? But at this moment, a light blue screen finally appeared in front of him belatedly. Ding, the energy intrusion is completed. The capture skill is completed. The capture object Si Sheng will be bound to you and become your puppet. Please make a decision among the following options. 1. Eliminate consciousness. The puppet will lose its autonomy, be completely controlled by the master, and obey all the instructions of the master. 2. Retain consciousness. The puppet will maintain its original independent personality and self, be out of control, and have the right to disobey orders, but cannot do anything to harm the master, including but not limited to doing things personally and instructing others. P.S. The above is an irreversible operation, please choose carefully. Su Salai was stunned for a while, and was overjoyed. Skill worked. Si Sheng didn't realize that the catastrophe was imminent, and his eyes were fixed on the boy under him. He was lying on the soft and fluffy mattress, his handsome little face was blushing and his eyes were covered in tears, but he still bit his lip, staring at him like an unyielding little beast. How can one person make such a big change? Snow Roland. In my impression, when I met him before, when did I not wince and dodge? A noble prince, but he didn't even dare to look directly at the minister. Today, not only did he use that mysterious skill to defuse his ultimate move, but he also dared to step on his face again and again. Now that he was caught, he was so close, yet dared to stare at him without fear of death? Is this really just a misunderstanding of him before? Si Sheng narrowed his eyes, and just as he was about to ask, he suddenly stopped. The next second, he stretched out his long arms, and the Radium 4000 laser gun Su Salai placed at the end of the bed fell into his hands. Click, the trigger is pulled, the energy is rapidly accumulated in the barrel, and it becomes dazzling in an instant. It all happened so fast. Su Salai's eyes widened, a heart raised in his throat. Just as he was about to operate on the light screen, he found that a light bullet shot out, rubbing the air with a light sound, and quickly hit the shadow under the window, preparing to hit something without error. Well! A painful groan sounded, which was particularly clear in the silent bedroom. Su Salai was startled and looked at the shadow. Someone! His mind moved slightly, and above the blurry shadow, only 3/4 of the health bar and a label suddenly appeared. Disgust, there are really people out there. And it's also an enemy with a disgusting favorability degree. Su Si's heart turned like electricity. If there is no critical strike, the maximum damage of Radium 4000 is 4000, and 1/4 of the blood is removed in one hit, which means that the blood volume of this shadow is about 16,000. Weaker than Janice, her level should be below LV15. But what the is this? NPCs? Or weird? Under Su Salai's vigilant gaze, the shadow wriggled and seemed to escape. Before he could remind him, Si Sheng fired 2 shots in a row with a gloomy expression, each shot accurately hitting the wriggling shadow. This time, perhaps looking closely, Su Salai saw several values pop up from above the shadows. 3000100030004000. Attacked. The last light damage directly quadrupled the critical strike value. The 2 shots went off, accompanied by 2 heavier grunts, and there was only a trace of blood skin left in the shadow. That muffled, it sounded like a woman's voice. The shadow was seriously injured, the speed of movement became slow, and red blood flowed on the ground. The breath was blown by the wind, causing Su Salai to frown slightly, feeling a burst of physical discomfort. The shadow was still crawling out the window, but Si Sheng didn't give it a chance to escape. He let go of the little emperor's feet, and with a dodge, he came to the window and stood quietly beside the shadow. When Su Saliguang looked at it like this, he could feel the despair of the shadow. Si Sheng didn't care about that much. His ears seemed to be feeling something, and he didn't notice any other changes, so he lowered his eyes to look at the mud-like shadow and kicked it away. With an ordinary kick, a number appeared above the shadow. 540. The blood bar, which was at risk, was cut in half again. Then, the shadow finally seemed to be unable to hold, and the darkness quickly faded, revealing a woman in a maid's uniform. With a pale face, she covered her bleeding abdomen, looked at Si Sheng in fear, and kept backing up until she leaned against the wall, with no way to retreat. Suddenly, she looked at Su Salai, with a face full of grief and pleading. "Your Majesty, save me!" Su Salai looked at her face, and the memory of Sino Roland came to mind. Mary! Isn't this the maid who just brought him water? It was her. Su Salai was in a daze, but the maid named Mary was anxious. "Your Majesty, please save me. It's my fault for trespassing into the bedroom late at night, but I have no ill intentions. I am willing to accept the punishment, please forgive me, and let the marshal spare my life." "No offense?" Su Salai looked at the disgusting label on her head, and didn't believe her nonsense. In the middle of the night, I ran to the emperor's bedroom, and my heart was full of hatred for him. Didn't I want to do something bad? Who will believe this? Su Salai didn't speak, and Mary's eyes showed despair. Just as she was about to say something, the muzzle of the laser gun touched her forehead. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, and she looked up at the man who pointed a gun at her. The man's blonde hair was bright and charming in the moonlight, but in Mary's eyes, he looked like a devil. Master Si Sheng. Without waiting for her to explain, Si Sheng's grey-blue eyes suddenly turned dark gold with a slight glitter. Mary looked into those eyes, the clarity in the eyes suddenly became cloudy, and the frightened face became calm. This scene is so strange, but Si Sheng is very indifferent. Who sent you here? He asked. Mary was dumbfounded and replied mechanically, Lord Arnoldan. The leader of the Baivat Empire. Yes. Su Salai looked at Si Sheng's interrogation with a complicated expression. The skill he just activated, he knows what it is. That's a rather special skill in God's game, answering questions. It was he who made a stinky and long side story to get it, and as soon as he got it, he learned it from Si Sheng, and now. Damn, after he finishes judging Mary, will he use this skill on him? Su Salai frowned. He turned his eyes and landed on the light screen in front of him again. Those two options were still there, waiting for his confirmation. Su Salai frowned slightly as he looked at the text on the light screen. Eliminate or retain consciousness. What did Arnoldan ask you to do? From the window, the voice of Si Sheng's interrogation continued. Mary has been completely controlled by the skills. She will answer whatever he asks. At this moment, she said truthfully, Lord Arnoldan said that the situation has changed, and Plan B is adopted. Plan B? Tell me more. Mary replied dumbly, Plan B is to hijack the new emperor and let him hand over the authority of the Roland Empire, so that the Baivat Empire can successfully take over Ixuxing. At this moment, Si Sheng suddenly frowned slightly and looked up at Su Salai. Su Salai, who was thinking about options, couldn't help but froze. Facing the man's dark golden eyes, an innocent expression of I'm very good appeared on his face, but his heart was beating wildly. Did this guy find something? Fortunately, Si Sheng only glanced at him, didn't seem to notice anything, then lowered his head again and looked at Mary, who lost his eyes. What if he won't cooperate? He continued. Mary paused and said softly, Kill him, then the Roland Empire will fall into chaos, and we will stir up the water in secret. Su Salai frowned. It was because he thought it too simply. Snow Roland's situation, is that dangerous? So apart from Si Sheng, how many people wanted to kill him? You are from Ai Shuexing, why did you choose to betray? At this time, he heard Si Sheng ask. At first glance, Mary looked like Ai Shuexing's. After all, it seemed that the Buwait people were all lizardmen. Moreover, in Snow Roland's memory, he seemed to treat this maid-sister well, and he did not treat or even abuse her in any way. Lord Arnoldan promised me that after the completion of the matter, he will arrange me to the Flanders Interstellar Federation. Mary said quietly. I will start a new life there. I don't have to worry about being recruited by the army every moment like I am now, and I may go to the front line and lose my life at any time. Su Salai was silent. Mary is an elementalist, and it is estimated that it is a rare talent of the Dark Department. In the Roland Empire, most of the elementalists are stationed in the army to fight the interstellar beasts on the front line. She was indeed in danger of being recruited, but Su Salai knew that the original Little Emperor had no such thoughts. How many of you are there? Si Sheng was expressionless, and the interrogation was still going on. There are only 2 I know, they are waiting for me outside, and if I don't succeed, they will carry out other plans. Other plans? Well, I didn't participate in those, but it's most likely to open the city gate and put the star beast in it. Mary's voice suddenly became excited, so I must succeed. Even if I kill your majesty, I can't let them open the city gate. That's too dangerous, a lot of people will die. Su Salai. So other people's lives are lives, but not his? However, the original Signor Roland really wanted to abandon his people and surrender AI Swexing. Without him crossing over, without him rejecting. Well, then Signor Roland was also killed by Si Sheng, so the conspiracy of the Byward Empire would not succeed. I don't know if it was caused by violent mood swings, or if Si Sheng released the control. Mary's eyes suddenly began to regain clarity. She was a little dazed at first, and then widened her eyes in shock. What did you do to me? She glared at Si Sheng and said with a face full of horror. Obviously, she still retains the memory of when she was just controlled. The feeling is probably terrible, and she can't help but say everything the enemy wants to know, and it's creepy to think about it. Si Sheng's dark golden eyes also returned to their original state, with grey-blue eyes, calm and indifferent. Last question. He said, do you know what will happen to the remaining people after the Roland Empire is destroyed? Mary's face paled, her eyes twinkling, and she said nothing. Looks like you know. Si Sheng tilted his head slightly and said indifferently, then there is nothing to say. Without giving her any more time to defend herself, the light bullet sank into Mary's forehead. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief at first, and then her pupils dilated away. She fell softly to the ground, dying. Su Salai opened his mouth with difficulty, but felt something stuck in his throat, making him speechless. This is his first. Seeing others die in front of you. He could see the woman's unwilling expression when she was dying, see the thick blood flowing from her body, and the strong smell, which was blown by the wind. She did not disappear into a light spot, she was not a pile of cold data, but a real living person. And now she is dead. Si Sheng looked back and saw that the silver-haired boy had a pale face, and even his lips were trembling. Is this afraid? What about the courage to offend him just now? Su Salai felt a shadow covering him. The tall man's figure blocked his vision, driving the terrifying blood red away from him, replacing it with a snow-white military uniform with gold threads. Su Salai pursed his lips and looked up at Si Sheng. The man's light blonde hair was blown slightly by the wind, and his grey-blue eyes were still so cold, but he was strangely less fearful. Obviously this guy just killed someone in front of him. Perhaps it was the light screen floating in the void that gave him confidence. Su Salai thought so. At this moment, Si Sheng looked at him and twitched the corner of his mouth lightly. That stern expression made Su Salai suspect that in the next second, he would raise the laser gun to his forehead again. However, what he feared did not happen. Si Sheng lowered his eyes slightly, fell on his feet, and said in a low voice, "Keep it for now, and I'll pick it up when I'm done with those trash fish." Su Salai blinked. The next second, Si Sheng raised his hand. Su Salai only felt a flash in front of him, thinking what he was going to do, his heart skipped a beat. However, after a closer look, he saw that the Radium 4000 was thrown over, and he took it subconsciously. Su Shi had just been shot a few times, and the barrel of the gun was a little hot, but it wouldn't burn anyone in his hand. He raised his head in a daze. The man had already turned and walked towards the door, leaving him an indifferent back. Walking to the door, he suddenly stopped and looked at him sideways. "Don't die." After he left a sentence without end, he lifted his foot and left the palace. Su Salai didn't return to his senses for a long time. What does this mean? He looked down at the laser gun in his hand. After firing a few shots, the value did not change much, only the durability decreased by 1, and the energy decreased by 5%. So, Si Sheng left this gun, for self-defense? Su Salai was very confused. But at this moment, the guard outside the door suddenly rushed in, and he hurriedly clenched the laser gun tightly and defended in front of him. He watched the guards warily. They bowed respectfully and apprehensively to him, and without waiting for him to say anything, went to deal with Mary's body. The sincere and frightened expression was probably frightened by Si Sheng. When he came back just now, this group of people didn't react so much. Su Salai pursed his lips, but did not relax. He was assassinated twice in a row, which made him a little startled. In this unfamiliar world, the situation facing the new emperor, Snow Roland, was too dangerous for him, and his current strength was not enough to make him stand in an immortal place. Even Su Salai recited the skill panel in his heart, and another light screen jumped out. The only singing skill he has mastered, capture, is being cooled down, and the cooling time is still 29 days, 23 hours, and 55 minutes. A full month. Su Salai's expression was slightly condensed, and he clenched the laser gun in his hand, and then closed the skill panel. He was not surprised by the cooldown of this skill. After all, it is really too powerful. It ignores the level gap and can easily turn others into its own puppet. However, trouble came next, which meant that he didn't have any self-defense skills. His eyes were fixed on the guards. Respect, friendly respect. The only thing that is fortunate is that he has a favorability system, which at least allows him to distinguish between enemy and friend at a glance, so that he will not be stabbed in the back. Only Snow Roland's relationship is indeed worrying. As an emperor, even the guards around him can't be more than respected by all the members. It is no wonder that the public support rate is so low that there will be a level of rebellion almost immediately. Su Salai was helpless, but didn't do anything immediately. Without strength, it is useless to say anything. Soon, the guards took the dead Mary away and asked the maid to change the carpet. Janice has arrived, directing the maids to clean up the mess. During this period, she planned to approach Su Salai, but when she saw that he was holding the gun alertly, she stopped and just increased her strength to urge the maids to act. After a while, the bedroom was cleaned up, the air purification was turned on again, and then perfume was sprayed on, which completely eliminated the strong smell. When everyone left, and only Janice was left, Su Salai relaxed a little. Janice came to the bed and looked at him with red eyes full of love. "Your Majesty, are you okay?" Su Salai was seen to be a little uncomfortable, especially with the suffix mom fan hanging on her head. But anyway, he had some confidence in her. "It's okay," he said calmly. Janice blamed herself, shocked and angry at the thought of Mary's betrayal. "Your Majesty, I was negligent this time. I will thoroughly investigate the maids in the palace and give your Majesty an explanation." Su Salai nodded, but he felt that Si Sheng was probably already doing it. At this time, the head maid said again, "Then your Majesty, do you need Janice to stay with you tonight?" It was said to be company, but in fact it was for protection, and I was worried that the young man would be too scared to sleep. Su Salai was somewhat moved. In special times, it is impossible to take care that the other party is a stranger of the opposite sex. He agreed with Janice to stay. Then Janice poured him another cup of hot water. Holding the glass, feeling the slightly cold palms gradually warming up, he glanced at the window again inadvertently, came back to his senses, and hurriedly moved away. People are not killed by him, he does not need to be nervous or afraid. It's just that everyone understands the truth. Whether it can be done is another matter. Su Salai held the glass and drank all the hot water in it. When he drank all the water, his ups and downs also calmed down. Putting the glass on the bedside table, he finally made up his mind and pressed the option on the prompt screen. 2. Retain consciousness. The puppet will maintain its original independent personality and self, be out of control, and have the right to disobey instructions, but cannot do anything to harm the master, including but not limited to direct action and instructing others. What about eliminating Si Sheng's consciousness? With a powerful puppet, can he be guaranteed to live safely in this different world full of crises? He knows too little about the world. Just like Mary who just attacked, without Si Sheng's words, could he rely on his own subjective judgment to discover her and instruct Si Sheng to kill her in time? Su Salai did not have this confidence. So he decided to take a gamble. Let Si Sheng retain his self-awareness on the premise that he can't hurt him, and at least have the possibility of developing into an ally. He needs this ally before he can protect himself. As for the previous unhappiness, Su Salai's eyes flashed slightly. Just remember first, it is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge for 10 years. When he was thinking, the light curtain in front of him appeared line by line of small characters. Ding Puppet Si Sheng contract is successful under the choice of retaining consciousness, you will obtain the following abilities. 1. The puppet cannot hurt you, and attacking you will cause backlash, the attack will be doubled and the critical strike rate will increase. 2. You will be able to use the skills mastered by the puppet, and the required magic value is doubled. 3. You can summon the puppet at any time. After the puppet agrees, it will be teleported to you immediately. Can I use Si Sheng's skills? Su Salai carefully looked at the introduction on the screen, but did not expect that choosing to retain consciousness would have such benefits. After a little thought, he understood why. After the consciousness is probably eliminated, the puppet is equivalent to his second incarnation. It can be said that those skills are his. So he can no longer let him master it himself, otherwise it will affect the balance. The retention of consciousness is different. The puppet has its own consciousness and may not be obedient, so as compensation, he can use the skills of the puppet. Su Salai was a little excited. Now, he has the skills to protect himself. As for the third ability, it was directly ignored by him. In a short period of time, the possibility of him getting along well with Si Sheng is infinitely close to zero. After all, this guy wanted to kill him just now, and Su Salai couldn't trust him at all. Su Salai called out the puppet page. There is only Si Sheng on the page, which is a super clear 3D stereo image, which is much more lined up than the big head portrait of die-hard fans. He licked his lips, admiring Si Sheng's beauty in a good mood. Although it has become an endless relationship now, he has no way to deny that Si Sheng does meet his aesthetics in appearance. Afterwards, he quickly flipped through Si Sheng's skill tree. The skill of staring at someone who died must be learned. Soon Su Salai found that skill. Rage of Thunder description, the Nirvana moves all the energy into the eyes, and by releasing the wind pressure with the power of thunder, inflicts a fatal blow to the enemy. Skill level, LV10, full level, elemental damage, 200,000 plus mana required to release, 10,367 attributes, light, thunder, wind. The owner can ignore the attribute requirements. Su Salai knew that this blow was powerful, but he didn't expect it to be so powerful. 200,000 damage in one hit. To know that his own HP is only 3,000, and even Janice's HP is only 40,000. This blow can kill 5 Janices. It's just that Su Salai calmed down when he saw the magic power needed to release. 10,367? This has zeros and zeros. He glanced at his property panel. Mana value, 0/600. His current mana value is only 600, and he used the singing skill capture before, but it is still in the state of being cleared, and there is no automatic recovery. Su Salai was speechless. Hey! The silver-haired boy sitting cross-legged on the bed sighed deeply, but soon, he regained his strength. I can't be too ambitious, there is no nirvana, and there are other skills. He murmured softly, his eyes fell on the void in front of him again, and more skills appeared on Si Sheng's panel. Dude, it's all maxed out. It seems that the character of Si Sheng is really set according to the values in his God's game, and many of his skills are used by him. Su Salai tutted lightly, feeling some indescribable feeling in his heart. He flipped through the pages slowly, browsed through all the skills, and finally sighed. Even the skill with the lowest mana consumption requires 5,000 plus mana, which is far from what he can use now. And even if it is the skill of the martial artist, he uses it, and every blow requires 100% of his physical strength. Physical strength is the blue of a warrior. As the level increases, that is, the physical quality increases, the physical strength will also increase, but the problem is that Snow Roland is obviously the embryo of the spiritual elementist. His physical strength will be very slow, and it is estimated that it is a little difficult to catch up with Si Sheng, a pervert with dual cultivation of martial arts. That is to say, if using Si Sheng's martial arts skills, if he can't kill with one hit, he will be very dangerous behind him. After all, according to the literal meaning, if his physical strength is cleared, he probably can't even move. Su Silai lowered his eyebrows. Forget it, now I barely have the ability to protect myself, as long as I don't run into two strong opponents, one blow should be enough. He exhaled, feeling better again. Turned off Si Sheng's skill tree, and took a look at his personal panel information. Level, LV79. It wasn't the full level he thought it was. Although I don't know what the upper limit of the game's level is, it should not be 79. According to the thinking habits of Chinese people, at least an integer should be taken, right? Si Sheng is so strong now, he didn't expect that there is still room for improvement. But now he is his puppet, in fact, the stronger it is, the better it is for him. Afterwards, Su Silai closed the panel. He didn't sleep, and although Janice tried to persuade him, he refused. Su Silai started to try to meditate according to Sinyo Roland's memory. Meditation can help the magic power to recover quickly. His mana value has been in a state of being cleared, which makes him a little uneasy, and it is better to restore the state to full. He gave it a little try and found that it quickly entered the state. It was a very mysterious feeling. He seemed to have entered another perspective. Although he closed his eyes, he could vaguely see the surrounding scenery. The closer you are, the clearer you can see. After a little distance, it's like a layer of veil, hazy, and you can't make it clear even if you try hard. In addition to these scenes, the most important thing is some light spots floating in the air. Small spots of light of different colors were distributed in the air in a disorderly manner. It was a picture that Snow Roland had never seen before. Su Silai curiously wanted to touch it, but found that the light spots were like children, and ran away laughing. After a few tries, Su Silai gave up. He continued to meditate, recovering his magic power according to Snow Roland's method. Gradually, a few lavender light spots separated from their companions, as if hesitating for something, they approached Su Silai hesitantly. A bit of enlightenment rose in Su Silai's heart. This lavender light spot should be the phonological element. It seemed that there was no danger. Those little spots of light suddenly sped up. They frolicked around Su Silai and finally stopped between his eyebrows. Then, they lined up one by one, carefully blending into the boy's eyebrows. Su Silai suppressed his curiosity and carefully felt the changes in his body. Those little light spots merged into his eyebrows, and then disappeared, but he could feel that they didn't really disappear. As for where to hide, he would not find out for a while. Su Silai closed his eyes, so he didn't see that the light screen in front of him kept popping up prompts. Meditation absorbs the sound element successfully, experience value +1. Meditation absorbs the sound element successfully, experience value +1. The experience bar was growing slowly and steadily. Su Silai focused on meditation, ignorant. Move forward a little bit. Deep in an alley in Roland Imperial City. A sharp blade slid across the man's throat, and before the blood spurted out, Si Sheng quickly retreated. Grey-blue eyes stared at the man indifferently, watching him crash to the ground and slowly lose his breath of life. Da-da-da! A burst of rapid footsteps came late. My lord the captain of the city guards came with a group of his men, and when he saw Si Sheng and the last person on the ground, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. Almost escaped by this traitor. The adults are still amazing. Si Sheng took out a handkerchief, wiped the blood on the dagger lightly, and said in a low voice, "Where are the others?" All were caught, and those who resisted were killed. Well. Si Sheng nodded, continue to clean up the next place. As ordered. Seeing them leave quickly, Si Sheng was about to follow when he suddenly stopped. He covered his chest, felt it carefully, and suddenly raised his head to look at the tall tower in the distance that was the commanding height of the entire imperial city and the seat of the royal palace of the Roland Empire. The man's eyebrows were tightly wrinkled, and there were waves in his deep eyes, which were changing, but after a while, he slowly calmed down again. One last glance at the palace, he withdrew his gaze, raised his heels and left behind the city guards. The night was getting darker. In the bedroom, the ancient clock hung on the wall, the pendulum ticking. Time moves little by little. The moon slowly sank into the sky, and the rays of the rising sun penetrated the clouds and spread on the ground, diluting all the filth of the night. A new day belonging to the Roland Empire has begun. A ray of sunlight shone in through the closed glass window, fell on the glass vase on the shelf, and finally reflected on the silver-haired boy's face. As if he didn't realize it, he was still obsessed with cultivation. I don't know how long it took, the boy's eyelashes trembled slightly, and he slowly opened his eyes. He had not slept all night, but he still looked bright, lavender eyes, as clear as the purest crystal, beautiful and dazzling. After gradually regaining his senses, the light in his eyes gradually subsided and was hidden in the depths of his eyes. However, before he could check the results of last night's cultivation, out of the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of a tall figure standing by the window. There are assassins. Su Silai's eyes narrowed slightly, and he hurriedly grabbed the Lei Yao 4000 placed beside him, and then he looked over there vigilantly. Then, saw a pair of indifferent grey-blue eyes. The blond man stood in front of the huge window of the bedroom, turned to look back, the bright sunlight shone in from behind him, coating him with a light halo. Su Silai's stiff back slowly relaxed. It turned out to be Si Sheng. Now, unlike last night, Si Sheng has become his puppet, and he can't hurt him anymore. Although there is still some fear in my heart, but I am not afraid and panic. Su Silai stretched out his hand and pressed his slightly sore waist, unconsciously maintaining a sitting position for a whole night of meditation, feeling a little overwhelmed. When did you come back? What about Janice? He turned his head to look, and found that she was still sleeping on the sofa, unknowingly. The boy's relaxed tone was like an ordinary greeting. Si Sheng watched him silently. The long soft silver hair is a little fluffy and messy, and the nightgown is also loose and loose, without the slightest dignity that a royal family member should have. Didn't hear the answer, the young man looked over with dissatisfaction, the handsome little face, no longer the slightest cowardice in the past. Especially, those violet-like eyes. No longer sluggish, as if it was injected with soul and thoughts today, and it shimmers in the morning light. Si Sheng stared at him for a long time, then looked away, and his eyes fell on his bare feet exposed outside the quilt. Probably aware of his gaze, the boy quickly curled his toes, swiped back, and was hidden under the quilt. When he raised his eyes, he met the boy's purple eyes with a bit of coldness and vigilance. What are you looking at? And what did you do to Janice? He thought it was impossible for Janice to fall asleep, but their conversation did not wake her up, and the reason was easy to guess. Si Sheng did not avoid his eyes. He and the boy looked at each other, suddenly dodged and came to him. Su Silai only felt his eyes sway, and a man appeared on the edge of the bed, almost elusive. The tall man looked down at him condescendingly, causing a lot of pressure to Su Silai. Just thinking of the backlash skills, he calmed down again. He pursed his lips and whispered, "You should feel it, right? You can't shoot at me now, or the attack will react on you. The taste of being knocked down by one's own attack, isn't it bad?" Su Silai felt that his tone could be called gentle. He was in a dangerous situation now, and he might be able to shake hands with Si Sheng temporarily to make peace. The rest will be discussed later when he becomes stronger. However, he did not expect that the blond man would suddenly raise his hand, squeeze his chin with his index finger and thumb, and leaned over to approach him. The man's grey-blue eyes were terribly deep, like an abyss under the sea. He heard him ask in a deep voice, "Who are you?"